Serafina's POV. The moment I saw Celeste's reflection in the spa's gilt-edged mirror, I knew the piece was over. Her golden hair swayed like she had a personal wind machine following her, and the laughter spilling from her lips wasn't just loud, it was performative. Flanking her were Abby and Emma, all three carrying the smugness of people used to having the world bow at their feet. Maya's hand was still on mine from when they'd walked in. The squeeze she gave me was subtle, but the message was clear. Brace yourself. We were invisible for the first 10 glorious seconds, until Abby's gaze landed on me. Her steps slowed, her mouth curled, and then the performance began. "Oh my God," she gasped, the sound dripping with disbelief. "Serafina Lockwood, you're alive?" Emma followed with a hand clasped dramatically to her chest. "Oh, what good luck. I heard she was attacked by rogues again." She lingered on the last word as though it tasted bitter. I kept my eyes on the warm water swirling around my ankles, the scent of citrus and sandalwood grounding me. My first instinct was to pretend I didn't hear them. I had no intention of feeding the fire. Not today. I just wanted to have a relaxing spa day, damn it. But Abby and Emma had never been the type to let silence stop them. "I mean," Abby continued, tilting her head toward Emma like they were performing for casting directors, "at some point, it's just bad luck. Or maybe..." She lowered her voice just enough to make everyone else in the spa who had turned their attention to them when they walked in unconsciously lean in. "Maybe she's just making it up for attention." Emma feigned a gasp so over the top it could have won awards. "You think so?" "I don't know," Abby said with mock innocence. "But you know, twice in such a short time? And then there was the shooting? What are the odds? Unless she's just trying to get people's attention, specifically a certain alpha." They didn't have to say Kieran's name for the jab to land. I took a slow sip of cucumber water, my grip a little too tight on the glass. "Ignore them, Sarah," I told myself sternly. "Don't give them the satisfaction." Emma's voice pitched higher. "You're right. Like, oops, I almost died. Please come save me again." Gosh, it's like she's auditioning for a tragedy every other week. And the worst part? She's not even being original about it. Like, come on, it's always rogues. Be a little more creative, you know? Both of them burst into laughter like hyenas in designer sandals. The water in Maya's footbath splashed as she shot to her feet. "Okay, that's enough," she said, her voice carrying the kind of deadly calm that was infinitely more dangerous than shouting. Abby and Emma turned to her, feigning confusion. "Excuse me? You heard me." Maya straightened to her full height, robe falling open just enough to reveal the sharp lines of muscle in her legs. "You want to throw shade? Do it where it belongs, on yourselves." Abby's nostrils flared. "We're just talking." "No," Maya said, taking a deliberate step closer. "You're putting on a pathetic show that, honestly, could use a little work. And for what? Because your queen needs her two puppets dancing around to make her feel important?" Between them, Celeste pursed her lips, her expression readable. It was odd that she hadn't joined in their little performance earlier, and that she wasn't clapping back now. Emma's mouth fell open, and Abby's eyes narrowed. "We're just pointing out the obvious. She keeps conveniently getting hurt, so Kieran has to save her. He divorced her for a reason, and..." "Yeah," Maya shot back. "And yet he still keeps her location tracked, shows up when she's in danger, and paints the streets with blood to keep her safe. Doesn't exactly scream, 'I can't stand you,' does it?" That stopped them cold for a half second. Maya pressed on. "If anything, it sounds to me like he regrets letting her go." My heart thudded painfully in my chest at that ludicrous insinuation. I wanted to pull Maya back, to tell her not to give them more ammunition, but a small secret part of me savored watching their perfect little composure crack. Abby's lips parted in outrage. Emma muttered something under her breath to her friend, too low for me to catch. "I think," Abby said slowly, "you should watch your mouth." Maya's face darkened, and she took a step forward, looking as formidable barefoot in a bathrobe as she would in her fighting leathers. "Is that a threat, princess?" Abby's gulp was audible as Maya leaned in, and her voice dropped low. "Because I promise you, you don't want to go down that path with me." Okay, that was my cue to intervene. I was half out of my chair now, ready to pull Maya back before the situation went nuclear, when Emma's lip curled. "Maybe we should just..." Her gaze flicked to me, then sharpened into something meaner. Teach her a little lesson for wasting everyone's time with her drama. They both took a step forward, and Maya's hands clenched into fists. Your plastic surgeon is going to be very wealthy when he's done reconstructing your faces, she growled. And then, shockingly, Celeste's voice cut through. Stop. It was soft but laced with steel. Abby and Emma froze instantly, like someone had hit the pause button on their remote controls. Abby blinked. But I said stop. Celeste's tone was different, not dripping with her usual saccharine mockery, not charged with open hostility, just firm. She crossed the space between us with deliberate grace. Every eye in the room locked on her. She was the picture of unruffled perfection. White wrap dress, diamond drop earrings, not a single hair out of place. Her gaze was fixed on me, and I frowned at the expression on her face, soft. I heard what happened, she said. Kieran told me when he got home yesterday. My jaw automatically clenched. Guaranteed Kieran didn't tell her everything that happened yesterday, or I'd be having my hair pulled out right about now. The gnawing guilt I'd felt in the period following Celeste walking into that hotel room after Kieran and I were together swirled in my stomach. I'm glad you're okay, Sarah. She chuckled softly at the surprise that crossed my face. Really, I am. If anything had happened to you, Daniel would have been devastated. What knocked the air out of me wasn't the uncharacteristic concern for me that Celeste was showing. It was her words. My instinct was to dissect every syllable, looking for the hook beneath the bait. I would never forget the venomous threats she'd made to me in the hospital after I got shot. So maybe I'll take Daniel as my own, raise him properly, as my son. How would you like that, Sarah? Danny calling me mommy? Is that what this was? Another thinly veiled threat? If something happened to me, would she take my son? Try as I did to see beneath her veil, all I found was perfectly measured sincerity. Somehow, that was more unnerving than anything else. Thanks, I said quietly, my voice coming out clipped. I didn't want to prolong this. I didn't want to stand here in a robe with wet toes and talk about my near-death experience with a woman who had spent the better part of my life delighting in my misery. They could have the spa. I was going home. I started to turn away, but Celeste's voice followed. Wait. I stopped, slowly faced her again. I wanted to apologize, she said. My eyes widened as an incredulous sound fell from Maya. Abby and Emma were looking at their queen bee like she'd sprouted horns. But Celeste ignored everyone, her gaze focused on me as she continued. For what happened at the party, things got out of hand. She exhaled like she was bracing herself. I went too far. My jaw unhinged. I didn't think in all Celeste's 28 years I'd ever heard her admit fault, let alone apologize for it. Who the fuck was this, and what had she done with my frosty sister? And I hope you'll come visit Mom sometime. She truly wishes for harmony in the family. It would mean a lot to her. For a moment, all I could do was stare at her. Because I didn't know this Celeste. I was used to the spiteful, bitter Celeste. This one was polished, diplomatic, the words fitting together like she'd rehearsed them in the mirror. And yet, there was no warmth in her eyes. Not even the faint flicker of sincerity that would have made her performance believable. But somehow, that lack of genuineness made the situation more bearable. She was playing another angle, I was sure of it. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew I wanted no part in it. Celeste, I said finally, I think it would be better and safer, honestly, for both of us if we just treated each other like strangers from now on. A shadow crossed her face, quick but noticeable. But you're not a stranger. You're my sister. I would have laughed if she hadn't looked so serious. But again, her words lacked any warmth or sincerity. We're better off strangers than sisters. I turned away before she could say anything else. Maya was already gathering her bag, her glare still burning holes in Abby and Emma. We didn't wait to finish our pedicures or even change back to our regular clothes. We just left. The spa's air gave way to the cooler breeze of the mall, and I felt my shoulders drop an inch, tension leaking away now that we were out of their line of sight. We had barely reached the parking lot when my phone buzzed in my robe pocket. I fished it out, expecting maybe a text from Lucian checking in. It wasn't. The screen lit up with a name I had never seen on my phone before. Leona Blackthorne. I hesitated for one beat before answering. Sarah. Her voice was sharp with urgency, skipping pleasantries. We need to talk. Serafina's pove. I was out of Maya's car before it even rolled to a stop. Let me know how it goes, she called out after me. I think I gave her an answer. I'm not sure. I was too distracted trying to get my encrypted phone out of my bag without tripping on the porch steps. Leona's voice from earlier still rang in my head. I'd thought she'd called to join the tedious chorus of "Stay away from Kieran," but the topic of conversation had been much more devastating. I could still hear the faint tremor underneath her usual poise. I was going to call Kieran first, but Daniel has always had a softer spot for you, and you might have a better chance to get through to him. Apparently, Daniel had been off lately. Not sullen, exactly, but different. Guarded, like he'd put up a wall between himself and the rest of the household. She said he still smiled, still did his lessons, and made polite conversation, but the light in my baby's eyes had dimmed. And then the part that hooked itself under my ribs. He used to be so open-hearted with us. Now I feel like he's closed himself off. Maybe you could have a heart-to-heart? You're his mother. He might tell you what he won't tell me. I'd spent the entire drive home with an invisible hand tightening around my throat. Now, my fingers hovered over the call button, my heart beating wildly against my sternum. It was stupid, but part of me was scared. Daniel was the one bright light in my life. If that light had dimmed, I pressed the button before I could talk myself out of it. Daniel answered on the second ring, his voice filled with his usual warmth. Hey, Mom. Just like that, my tension eased a notch. Hey, sweetheart. How's my favorite person in the whole world? He beamed. Good, now that he's talking to his favorite person in the whole world. I leaned back into my seat, relief flooding through me, loosening the rest of the tension. For a while, we traded easy chatter. What he'd had for lunch, Grandma made something with quinoa, which I'm pretty sure is a fancy kind of bird food, but it's okay because Grandpa snuck me a hot dog later. How his lessons were going. Science and English are fine, but I'm pretty sure my tutor has never seen a math equation in his life. How his surfing lessons were going. I rode a really high wave last week. I wiped out after 30 seconds, but it was so cool. If Leona hadn't said anything, I might have hung up thinking everything was fine. His eyes shone with their familiar sparkle. He sounded happy. He sounded like Daniel. Like my baby. But I couldn't unhear her words, and that made me reckless. So, without thinking, I said, Leona mentioned you've been quieter lately, more withdrawn. Is something going on? The silence that followed was not my son searching for the right words. It was the heavy, frozen kind that settles the moment you realize you've stepped on thin ice. When he finally spoke, his tone was sharp in a way I'd never heard from him before. And his eyes, my breath hitched as the sparkle winked out like throwing a blanket over a firefly. So that's why you called. Because Grandma said I'm acting weird? No, I began, but he was already rolling over me. You know what's weird? How the adults in my life always decide how I'm feeling without asking me first. You and Grandma and Dad, you just decide. You decided to send me here without asking. Every time I say I want to come home, you promise me soon, but it's already been months. His voice rose, each word tightening like a vice around my heart. You already have control over what happens to me. Where I live, who I live with, what I eat, it's never about what I want. Must you control how I feel too? My heart lurched. Daniel, who are you to decide if I feel weird? You and Dad aren't happy all the time. Grandma and Grandpa aren't happy all the time. Why do I have to be happy all the time? It felt like the ice had broken underneath my feet and I was drowning in freezing water. I'd never heard Daniel talk this way before. And it wasn't just his tone, not just his frustration, it was the sheer weight of his words. They weren't careless. They'd been stewing inside him for a long time, looking for a way out. The thought that my 9-year-old had been forced to grow up so much, that he had so many complex emotions, tore at my heart. For a few seconds, I didn't know what to say. My brain scrambled to pull up the right mom response, but every line felt thin, flimsy against the reality of what I'd just heard. I had to stop, to gather myself so that when I spoke again, my voice didn't tremble. I'm so sorry, my love. I realize that probably doesn't make up for anything, but... I sighed. Your dad and your grandparents and we all love you so very much, Every single decision we make is for your own good, even though it might not seem that way right now. I'm so sorry you're hurting, sweetheart." His breathing on the other end slowed, and he closed his eyes. I let the tear I'd been keeping at bay slide down my cheek, and hastily wiped it away before he opened his eyes again. He started, then stopped. When he spoke again, the fight in his voice had dulled, but the frustration still hummed underneath. "I miss you, Mom. I miss waking up to the smell of your cooking. I miss your hugs and kisses. Your voice doesn't sound the same over the phone. You always say my home is with you, but you're not here." His voice cracked, and my heart cracked along with it. How am I supposed to be okay when I'm away from my home? That was it. The dam in my chest broke. "Oh, baby." My throat ached, my voice thick. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you felt like this. I should have asked earlier how you felt about it all. I should have made it easier for you to tell me these things. I hate that I made you feel like you had to hold it in." "I know you didn't mean to," he murmured. Still, guilt gnawed at me. My son, my baby, had been carrying this weight while I'd been telling myself he was fine, that he was adapting, that he was safe. But rogues weren't the only thing capable of hurting him. "I can't promise that you're coming home soon," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "Not in the aftermath of the fresh rogue attack. I would rather have my insides carved out than have a single slimy claw touch my baby. But I can promise that I'll bring home to you," I added, reaching a resolution. Screw Kieran's reservations about the security risk of me going to the island. Daniel's breath audibly hitched. "What does that mean?" I smiled softly. "It means I'll see you soon, my baby, and I'll stuff you to the brim with all your favorite foods and smother you with hugs and kisses." His eyes widened, and that spark flickered like it was trying to come back to life. "You mean it?" I didn't know how I was going to convince Kieran, but I knew that nothing could keep me from my baby. "Yes, my love? I mean it. Just hold on for me a little longer, okay?" There was a pause, then a soft, hopeful, "Okay. In the meantime, can you do something for me?" He smiled wryly. "Depends. Is it a math problem?" That tugged a reluctant smile from me. He was joking around. He would be fine. "No, just don't shut me out, Danny. Even if you're angry, even if you think I won't get it, I'd rather hear it all than feel like you're hiding pieces of yourself from me." He nodded. "I'm sorry, Mom." I shook my head. "You have absolutely nothing to be sorry for. I just hate to see you hurting. Especially knowing I was the cause." We lingered on the line for a while after that, talking about all the things we would do when I came. He'd show me how to play the new video game I'd gotten for him. He'd show me the surfing moves he'd learned. We'd have ice cream on the beach and go sailing. Slowly, the sharp edges of the earlier strain softened. By the time we said goodbye, his voice was brighter. Not fixed, not magically healed, but lighter. And for now, I'd take that. Still, as I sank further into the couch and closed my eyes, my chest ached with the knowledge that my son's smile had been carrying cracks I hadn't seen. And the weight of my promise, to breach the distance between us no matter what it took, settled over me like a vow I couldn't afford to break. Serafina's Pove. The gates of the Nightfang pack house loomed ahead the next day, their wrought iron curves glinting under the bright morning light. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles pale. I hadn't been here since before Kieran and I got divorced, but even when I occasionally had reason to visit, I was treated with disdain, cold stares and sharp barbs by the pack members. After all, I wasn't their Luna. I was just the woman who trapped their alpha in marriage with my pregnancy. But now I was back. For Daniel, nothing else. I forced myself to remember that. The guards at the checkpoint stiffened as my car approached. They recognized me instantly, and one stepped forward, his hand lifted in a signal to halt. I rolled down the window, my voice firm before he could say a word. "I'm here to see Alpha Kieran. It's urgent." They exchanged glances. I caught the faint twitch at the corner of one guard's mouth, a trace of unease. "The Alpha's in his office," the older one finally said. "But he's occupied." "Then unoccupy him," I said. "Ma'am, we can't just—" "It's about my son," I said sharply. "You know your future, Alpha?" That shut him up. After a beat, the older guard muttered into his calm, then waved me through. The long driveway stretched ahead, the main pack house rising at the end like a fortress of stone and glass. I'm here for Daniel, I told myself as I stepped out of my car, my resolve outweighing my hesitation. Nothing else matters. The place was buzzing softly, voices in rooms, footsteps in the distance. But the hallway leading to Kieran's office was quiet. The corridors of the Night Fang Pack's main building always felt colder than I remembered, like the walls themselves had been built to keep out warmth, not just the weather. Everything about this place screamed order and vigilance. I could almost feel the weight of invisible eyes following my every move, guards posted where I couldn't see them. My heels clicked on the polished stone floor, the sound sharp in the heavy silence that followed me. I ignored the glances from passing wolves, their whispers tucked behind wary expressions. But after 10 years, it all slid off my back like water off polyester. Halfway down the hallway to Kieran's office, my steps faltered, and my chest tightened. Celeste stepped out from an adjoining hallway as if she'd been waiting for me, her heels clicking in a deliberate, mocking rhythm. She looked perfectly poised in a sapphire dress that set off her eyes like poisoned jewels. Her lips curved in a smile that was all mockery. Well, didn't we agree to be strangers, dear sister? Yet here you are, haunting these halls like an uninvited ghost. Ah, there it was. I didn't know who that show of faked penitence she'd put on yesterday was for, but at least here with just us two, she was being herself. Unfortunately for her, I was still in no mood to engage. I didn't slow down. Move, Celeste, I have no time for you today. She pushed off the wall, falling into step beside me. No time, or no courage to admit you're here because you can't stay away from him? Her voice dripped with false sweetness. You make such a show of severing ties, yet here you are, running back when you need something. What is it this time, Sarah? Another crisis only you can dramatize. I kept walking. My patience had been ground down to dust long before this conversation. Believe what you like. I'm here for Daniel. Oh, of course, she drawled. Always the dutiful mother. Convenient. But Kieran doesn't owe you anything. She turned to the guards stationed outside Kieran's door. Remove her. She's trespassing. The guards hesitated. I may not have been Luna, but I was once married to their alpha. Celeste was a glorified stranger, and if what happened at her party was any indication, I doubted many of the pack members actually liked her. Celeste's voice sharpened. Now. One of them took a step toward me, then stopped as the office door swung open. Kieran stood there, tall and sharply cut in a dark shirt, his expression cool until his gaze landed on me. Then, surprise, edged with something unreadable. Sarah? It was downright maddening the way just the mere sound of my name from those sensual lips of his brought back a rush of the memories I'd tried so hard to suppress. I folded my arms across my chest like that would stop my heart's attempt to beat out of my chest. We need to talk. He studied me for a beat too long, as though weighing the risk of whatever I was about to say. About what? Daniel? His entire posture changed, shoulders squaring, jaw tightening, eyes sharpening like a blade honing its edge. Inside, he said. Celeste made a sound of protest, but Kieran didn't even glance her way. Not now, Celeste. I stepped into his office, feeling Celeste's glare on my back like a hot brand. The office smelled faintly of leather and paper, orderly, controlled, with not a single thing out of place. It was very Kieran. He closed the door behind us, shutting out the echo of Celeste's irritation. The last time I'd been in this room... Had I ever been in this room? There had been so many parts of Kieran's life I hadn't been privy to. I didn't think you'd seek me out, Kieran said, leaning against the edge of his desk. Especially after... His jaw flexed, remembering. Last time. A traitorous patch of heat bloomed in my chest, and it took all my willpower to slam a mental door on the emotions fighting to surface. For a long moment, the silence between us felt almost tangible, layered with old resentments, tangled history, and something else I didn't want to acknowledge, let alone name. Suddenly, Kieran's massive office seemed too small, like the walls were closing in on us. Like I said, I'm here for Daniel. My voice came out louder and sharper than I'd intended, and I fought back a cringe. Kieran stared at me for one breathless, heated moment, and then he nodded. Sit, he said, moving around to the other side of his desk. I didn't. Leona called me, I began. She's worried about Daniel. She says he's been withdrawn, guarded. I called him myself. My voice wavered for half a breath before I forced it steady. The nutshell is that he misses home, misses me. Kieran leaned back in his chair, his gaze searching my face. "I want to see my son," I said, no hesitation. "Not on a screen, not over a call. I want to be there with him. And I don't care about the security risks or whatever. I'll do whatever it takes to—" "I already know," he said finally. "My mother told me too." That admission startled me. Then, "I've been making arrangements for you to visit the island," he cut in. Security was the issue, but he tapped his fingers lightly against the desk. "Things have changed." "How?" "After the last kidnapping attempt, I followed some new leads. We've identified a rogue network operating on the outskirts. It's not the whole picture, but it's enough to tighten the borders and remove the immediate threat to you. For now." I stood there for a moment, processing his words. I had expected resistance, another fight to justify my intention to visit my son. But instead, there was agreement. "You're letting me go to him," I said slowly, as if speaking it aloud might cause the offer to vanish. "Yes." His voice was quiet, but certain. "If that's what you want, I'll see it arranged. The sooner the better." Relief rushed through me so fast it felt almost dizzying. I lowered myself into the chair opposite him, my posture still guarded but my pulse easing. "Thank you." His eyes lingered on me, unreadable. "There's one more thing." I looked up at him, instinctively bracing myself for what he would say. "I'm going with you." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "You're... what?" "I'm going with you," Kieran repeated, his voice like smooth granite, unyielding and final. My first instinct was to push back, to tell him that this was my visit, my time with Daniel, and I didn't need his looming, overbearing presence shadowing every interaction. The last thing I needed was another altercation with him in front of Daniel. "I don't need." "This isn't about need," he said, his gaze locking with mine, unwavering. "It's about making sure nothing happens to you, or to Daniel. I'm not trusting anyone else with that." Heat crept up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from the sheer nerve of him thinking I couldn't handle myself. But I also knew he wasn't entirely wrong. After all, if it weren't for him, gods know what would have happened to me. Still, I couldn't stop myself. "Do you think I can't handle a trip without you?" I asked, arching a brow. A faint, humorless smile tugged at his mouth. "I think it's better if we don't gamble with Daniel's safety. And you forget, he's my son too. I miss him. I'm not stopping you from seeing your son. Why should you stop me?" Fuck. How could I argue with that logic? I sat back, crossing one leg over the other, trying to look far more relaxed than I felt. "Fine," I said, though the word was more a reluctant exhale than agreement. Kieran's eyes flickered, just barely, a flash of something I couldn't read. Satisfaction? Relief? Triumph? He nodded once. "I'll finalize the arrangements by tonight. We leave in 2 days. 2 days. 2 days to prepare myself, not for the island, not for Daniel, but for the reality of being in close proximity to Kieran, with no mode of escape but the big blue ocean." I was already imagining the salt-scented air, the low hum of waves against the dock, the quiet of a place far removed from the mainland. And now, I'd have to imagine it with him there. His presence impossible to ignore, his voice carrying across the sound of the ocean, his eyes finding mine when I least expected it. A private island, me, my son, and my ex-husband. A nice family vacation. What could possibly go wrong? Serafina's Pove. I sat at the edge of the sparring mat, still breathing a little hard from my final round of drills with Maya. Most of the other trainees had already left for the day, so the cavernous training hall we'd moved to felt strangely quiet. Just the faint hum of the ventilation system and the muted thud of someone working a punching bag in the distance. Maya finished her set of push-ups, springing to her feet with the kind of grace that came from years of discipline and practice. She swiped a towel across her brow, then planted herself in front of me, grinning at me like I'd just told her the best gossip she'd heard all week. "So," she said, tossing her towel onto a bench, "you're actually going to see Daniel. About damn time." "Yeah," I laughed. "I can't wait. I've missed him so much." Her smile was genuine, but her eyes carried a flicker of worry. "You know I'm happy for you," she added, "but given what you told me about Kieran's parents, I'm worried they're going to give you a hard time. You deal with that enough over here with your own family." I masked the sudden tightness in my chest by leaning over and grabbing my water bottle off the bench beside her. "I can handle them." "I know you can," she said quickly. You can handle anything, but that doesn't mean I like the thought of you in the lion's den." I took a long drink, the cool water washing away the dryness in my throat. "They might still look down on me," I said when I was done. "But around Daniel, they'll behave." I shrugged. They wouldn't risk showing him that kind of toxicity. And besides, I allowed myself a small, wry smile. I'm not the same pushover I used to be. Maya's grin widened, something like pride shining in her eyes. "Damn right you're not. Honestly, the way you've been carrying yourself lately, I've never been prouder, babe." My cheeks flushed. Any compliment from Maya felt like the ultimate achievement. She continued, as I took another sip from my bottle, and the rest of her sentence caught me off guard. "It's an amazing look on you, and if Kieran hasn't noticed, he's blind, but one day, that veil over his eyes is going to be torn off, and when he finally does, he's going to regret letting you go for that vapid bitch of a sister you've got." I choked on my water, coughing. "Maya, don't talk nonsense." "It's not nonsense," she said with an unrepentant shrug. I rolled my eyes, and she did the same, chuckling. "It doesn't even matter. The bastard doesn't deserve you, veil or no veil." She held a palm up solemnly like a salute. "I'm die-hard Team Lucian." I tried to fight the laugh bubbling up, but it escaped anyway. "You're incorrigible." "Uh-huh, and you love me for it." I shook my head, but my smile lingered. "You really think Lucian's the better choice, huh?" Her expression softened, but her tone stayed firm. "I think Lucian treats you like you matter, and that's worth a hell of a lot more than whatever history you've got with Kieran." I didn't argue because she wasn't wrong. Being with Lucian was a breath of fresh air, and in the space of a couple of months, he'd treated me with more respect and consideration than Kieran ever did in 10 years. I leaned over and hugged Maya tight, the scent of her usual citrusy shampoo familiar and grounding. "I'll miss you," I murmured. "Take care of yourself while I'm gone." "You too, Sarah." She pulled back and braced her hands on my shoulders. "And remember, if anyone gives you grief over there, you've got a whole lot more fight in you now than you did the last time they saw you." Her words settled in my chest like a warm ember, and I smiled, stoking that fire inside me. I could do this. I could survive the trip. After we parted ways, I made my way back to the locker room to get the rest of my stuff I didn't want to leave behind at OTS while on my trip. As I zipped my bag shut, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Lucian's name. I hadn't seen him since he dropped me off at home after the rogue attack, and other than his message asking me to take the day off, I hadn't heard from him. Maya would process my leave from OTS, but it didn't feel right to leave without informing him, or at least saying goodbye. I hit call and pressed the phone to my ear. It rang, and rang, and rang some more, then went straight to voicemail. I frowned, trying again. This time it went straight to voicemail. "Hey," I said after the tone, keeping my voice casual. You're obviously busy, so I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going on a trip to see Daniel. You're not around, so I can't say goodbye, but, just call me back when you get this. I'd love to see you before I leave." I hung up, staring at the screen. It was odd how little I actually knew about Lucian's life outside of the OTS. In here, he was as familiar and steady as my training routines. The way he moved in the training yard, the measured way he gave advice, his warm, tender smile that contrasted the psychotic way he trained trainees. But beyond these walls, I realized he was an enigma. I didn't know much about his pack, where he lived, who he spent his evenings with, or what he did when he wasn't here. The thought unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. The next morning, Kieran arrived earlier than expected. I'd been double-checking my packing list when the sharp knock came at my door. When I opened it, he was there, annoyingly put together in dark jeans and a black shirt, his hair just slightly mussed like he'd run his hands through it on the way over. "Ready?" he asked, his voice clipped, but not unfriendly. I swung my bag over my shoulder, tugging my suitcase behind me. "Ready." He took the bag from me without asking, slinging it over his own shoulder as though it weighed nothing. Then he reached down and snatched the suitcase out of my hand, too. He pulled my luggage behind him as I locked up. "We'll be flying straight to Nassau on the jet," he said calmly as we walked towards his car, like trips to tropical islands on billion-dollar private jets made for normal conversation. The trip will take 5.5, 6 hours tops. From there, we'll take the yacht instead of the seaplane. There are too many variables. My head was ducked as he continued rattling off logistics, staring at Lucian's name in my phone. He hadn't called me back or replied to my texts, and I didn't know if the churning feeling in my stomach was worry for him or unease that I was being ignored. But he wouldn't do that, right? Lucian wasn't that type of, "Hey." My eyes widened, and indignation sliced through me as Kieran snatched my phone out of my hand. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Kieran's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as his eyes darted across my screen, reading the unanswered texts, no doubt. When he was done, he snorted and tossed my phone back at me. What a dick. I caught the phone and threw a glare at Kieran. He's not a dick. He folded his arms against the trunk of his Escalade, a brow arched. Yet, he's ignoring your messages and calls. What kind of boy The rest of the words seemed to hook in his throat, and his jaw clenched. First, I had to be the one to save you from the rogue attack, and now this. Maybe Lucian Reed's not as reliable as you think. He's reliable, I snapped. Have you forgotten that he was fighting rogues of his own? He shrugged, one brow lifting. Okay, what's your excuse for now? It's not like it's a life or death situation, I said sharply, and I don't measure people's worth by whether they drop everything the moment I call. His lips curved, not in amusement, but in something closer to irritation. You defend him like he's some paragon of loyalty. Because he's been good to me, I said, my voice steady. And that's more than I can say for some people. The subtext didn't go unnoticed, and the air between us grew taut, the kind of tension that didn't need raised voices to make itself known. Kieran's hand flexed on the strap of my bag, his gaze cutting away as though to keep from saying something he might regret. I scrambled for something to say to temper the hostility. We hadn't even started the trip, and we were already butting heads. But whatever I would have said was drowned out by the deep, throaty rumble of an engine reaching us. Kieran and I both snapped our heads in its direction, and my relief escaped as a breathy laugh. A sleek red car rolled up the driveway, its glossy surface catching the morning light. Lucian's car, Serafina's Pove. A mix of delight and nervous anticipation lifted my chest as Lucian stepped out of his car and moved towards me with that effortless stride of his, all measured precision and calm confidence. "Sarah," he said, and the familiar warmth of his voice made me momentarily forget the tension that had been looming between me and Kieran. I barely had time to respond before he closed the distance, and I could see the apology already there in his eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't reach you sooner," Lucian said quickly, almost stumbling over the words. "I had to take an out-of-town trip for pack business the past couple of days and just got back this morning. He stopped, clearing his throat. "I should have let you know. I didn't mean to worry you." Relief flooded through me so fast it felt dizzying. "Lucian?" "It's okay," I said, my voice soft. "Really. I was just worried because I hadn't heard from you, that's all." I gave him a reassuring smile as his gaze lingered on me, steady with the weight of his remorse and sincerity. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, almost an answering smile, but not quite. He ran a hand over his jaw and nodded. I should have told you. I know that doesn't excuse the silence." I shook my head. "You're forgiven," I said. "I was worried, yes, but I understand that you're busy." "Not too busy for you," he countered. Kieran's low scoff cut through the moment like a scythe. I turned my head sharply to see him still leaning against his car, arms folded, looking every bit as infuriating as ever. "Sorry," he said, not sounding the least bit apologetic. "I'm just having a hard time understanding your excuse." His dark eyes were trained on Lucian. "Were you on a business trip in another dimension? In space? Under the sea? Some distant floating island with no cell service?" I gritted my teeth, forcing calm to cool the anger only Kieran Blackthorne could ignite in me. "Kieran," I said carefully, "can you wait for me in the car? I'll be just a minute." He raised a disbelieving brow and he looked like he was about to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned my back to him and gave Lucian my attention. This was the last time I would see him in a while, and I wasn't about to let Kieran ruin the moment. Lucian shifted slightly, his eyes flicking over my shoulder before drawing back to me. He cleared his throat and took my hand, pulling me gently towards his car. I flinched slightly at the thunderous sound of Kieran slamming his door. I took a deep breath, exhaling through my nose as Lucian opened the back door of his car to reveal a large, neatly wrapped package taking up his back seat. "I got you something," he said, voice low. "A parting gift. It's for you and Daniel, actually. Something to help you two bond." "Oh, Lucian," I whispered, drawing my gaze away from the present to look at him. "This is lovely. Thank you," but I didn't miss the way he stiffened at the conjunction. Kieran asked that I travel light, more like ordered, but semantics. When Lucian arched a brow, I rushed to explain. "It's all part of the security protocols to avoid exposing Daniel's location." "Right," Lucian drew out, closing the car door. "But thank you, really," I said, feeling awful. "Maybe we can use it when Daniel comes back." "Yeah," he exhaled, nodding. "Sure." Then his gaze softened, searching my face. "Look, Sarah, Kieran was right. I didn't go anywhere without cell service." My breath stilled. "Then why didn't you answer my calls or text me back?" He exhaled heavily. I was in my head a lot this trip, berating myself. I frowned. "Why?" He answered my question with another question. "Sarah, did I let you down last time, with the rogues, I mean?" "No." I answered immediately, reaching for him. "Why would you think that?" He shook his head. "I should have been the one to save you." "You did save me," I said. "You took on all those rogues at the restaurant. You saved me back at my father's funeral, and you've been saving me ever since. You gave me OTS, new friends." I drew closer. "You." Warmth mellowed his expression. "You could never let me down, Lucian." The tension left his shoulders, and for a fleeting second, he seemed almost human, not the inscrutable, confident alpha I'd grown used to seeing. Then he leaned in, closing the small space between us. Before I could process, his lips brushed mine in a gentle kiss. My heart skipped a beat, my surprise fading as I tilted my chin up to kiss him back. His hand lingered on my cheek, just enough to feel the warmth of his skin when he pulled back. "We've only been on one date, and now you're leaving. I hope this brief separation doesn't affect us," he whispered, voice low and earnest. I blinked, surprised by the openness in his words. Lucian rarely, if ever, expressed himself like this. Sure, he was free with his compliments and words of comfort, but I'd never seen him express vulnerability or uncertainty. And yet, standing there in the soft morning light, I couldn't help but feel the sweetness of it all. The quiet reassurance that even if his life was a mountain of responsibilities and obligations, I mattered in it. "I don't think it will," I said softly, leaning into him just a fraction, savoring the moment while I could. "I'll be back before you know it, and we'll pick up right where we left off." Lucian smiled faintly, his lips brushing mine as he leaned in again. "I'll hold you to that," he murmured. I nodded, holding his gaze a beat longer. There was just something so grounding about him, a calm certainty that always made me feel safe. The moment was shattered when Kieran's impatient voice cut through again, sharp and mocking. "Here I was thinking you were in a hurry to see your son, Sarah, but please, by all means, waste the whole day making googly eyes." I closed my eyes, sighing softly. I'd experienced many versions of Kieran, cold, distant, dominating, enraged, possessive, indomitable. I could go on, but this utter childish petulance was new and already aggravating. I took a breath, lingering a heartbeat longer with Lucian before finally retreating. "We can't communicate due to security reasons, but I'll see you when I'm back." He gave me a soft smile that didn't quite assuage the sudden hardness in his eyes. "Have a safe trip, Sarah. I'll be thinking of you." I gave him one last smile before I turned away, heading towards Kieran's car. Kieran straightened as I slid into the passenger seat, lips curved in an infuriatingly smug way. "Don't tell me you're going to waste your whole vacation with Lucian Reed stuck in your head," he said, voice low but carrying the usual bite. I rolled my eyes and said nothing. "The silent treatment, really, Sarah?" The smugness was gone from his voice, replaced with an edge that almost made me smile. I closed my eyes and settled into the seat. "Wake me up when we get to the airport." There was a beat of heavy silence where I fought with myself to keep my eyes closed and not give Kieran the satisfaction of a reaction. Finally, he snorted and started the engine, the low rumble of the SUV vibrating through the seats. I let out a breath, keeping my eyes closed. The drive to the airport was tense but quiet. I focused on my breathing, letting the hum of the tires and the occasional turn of the wheel soothe me. Periodically, I felt the weight of Kieran's gaze, but I stubbornly kept my eyes closed. This trip wasn't about him. It was about Daniel, and if he wanted to act petty, he'd have to do it silently. At that point, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't engage with Kieran on this trip, not unless it involved our son. Other than that, I would stay as far away from him as I could. That was the only way I could survive the next few days with my sanity intact. Serafina's Pove. I should have known my plan wouldn't survive first contact with reality. It lasted through the 6-hour flight to Nassau, which I spent on the opposite side of Kieran's private jet, as far away from my ex-husband as I could get. Even with the distance, Kieran's presence was heavy, but contained, controlled, like a predator sizing up its prey. Except I wasn't prey. I had Daniel on my mind, the island ahead, and the tiny spark of warmth from Lucien's kiss still lingering in my chest. But everything went to shit after we touched down in Nassau and transitioned onto Kieran's yacht, Ashar's Pride, and I realized something new about myself. I get seasick. The yacht looked like something out of a glossy magazine spread. Sleek, ivory-white hull gleaming beneath the noon sun, its polished chrome railings winking like jewelry against the endless sweep of ocean. Even from the dock, it was impossible not to be impressed. The vessel stretched long and graceful like a predator of the sea, and once inside I'd glimpsed plush interiors, wide sofas upholstered in cream leather, thick carpeting underfoot, and dining tables that looked more suited for banquets than travel. Kieran might not have been one for lavish or opulent parties, but there were definitely some luxuries he indulged in. But no amount of luxurious comfort could save me. Not an hour after boarding, the sea turned against me. The gentle rocking that had seemed pleasant on shore morphed into a nauseating rhythm that churned my stomach with every rise and fall. My head spun, my skin went clammy, and all the grandeur of polished wood, glittering chandeliers, and panoramic windows blurred into a haze of misery. I had never been on a ship before. If I had known seasickness was this vicious, I would have begged to travel another way. By air, by land. Fuck, I would have walked if I had to. Anything but this endless, nauseating bobbing. What unsettled me most, though, wasn't the sickness. It was Kieran. Because he didn't leave me to suffer. He didn't sneer, didn't mock, didn't ignore me the way the Kieran I remembered from our marriage surely would have. Instead, he took care of me. He held back my hair when I doubled over the basin and attempted to vomit all my internal organs. He steadied me when I stumbled, his arms like iron bars of strength I hadn't asked for but clung to anyway. He pressed a cool cloth to my forehead, brushed strands of sweat-damp hair away from my face, and murmured low words of comfort I couldn't quite catch over the roaring in my head. And when the ship's doctor brought medicine, bitter, chalky tablets that turned to paste on my tongue, Kieran was the one who insisted I swallow them. "Take it, Sarah," he said, voice brooking no argument. Though his hand on mine was steady, not harsh, I tried to protest, some small, stubborn flicker inside me refusing to surrender to his authority, but my body betrayed me, weakness made me pliant. When he pressed the cup of water to my lips, I drank. When he guided me back toward the bed in the private cabin, I let him. My cabin was decadent, wide enough to shame most hotel suites, its walls paneled in rich walnut, its king-size bed layered with silk sheets in a muted cream. The windows stretched floor to ceiling, offering a view of the ocean rolling endlessly into the horizon. It should have felt like luxury. Instead, it felt like a trap, soft but suffocating. Kieran lowered me carefully onto the bed, his hand still cradling my arm, as though afraid I'd collapse again. "You need rest," he said. His voice was quiet, but there was something in it I couldn't name. Not command, not irritation. Concern. I stared at him, hazy from nausea and medication, wondering if I was hallucinating. In 10 years of marriage, I had never received such a thing as concern from him. Not when I burned with fever, not when I wept alone in our cavernous house, not when loneliness and despair had threatened to eat me alive. And yet, here he was, our divorce finalized, our lives unstitched, sitting by my side as if I were the most precious thing in the world to him. It was almost laughable, overwhelmingly cruel. "You'll feel better after you sleep," he added, and when I didn't immediately close my eyes, he sighed and brushed his thumb across my knuckles. The gesture was so gentle, so startlingly intimate, it felt like a wound opening. And then his phone rang. The sharp sound cut through the quiet of the cabin, shattering the strange, fragile stillness between us. Kieran stiffened. His gaze flicked toward the bedside table, where the device buzzed insistently, screen flashing with a name I didn't need to see to recognize. Celeste. I felt it like a punch to the gut. He'd made me leave my phone back in LA and warned me not to give anyone the number of the encrypted phone for Daniel's safety. And yet, Kieran didn't move at first. His jaw tightened, his hand still warm around mine. For a heartbeat, I thought he would ignore it, that he would stay. But the ringing continued, as insistent and demanding as Celeste herself. Finally, with a muttered curse under his breath, he eased my hand back onto the sheets and stood. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. "I'll be right back," he said, and it sounded like a promise I wasn't foolish enough to hold on to. He left the cabin, closing the door behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. I should have let myself drift into the medicated haze, let sleep claim me, and wash the sickness from my body. But instead, I found myself pushing weakly upright, straining to hear through the thin barrier of the door. And I heard everything. Kieran's voice was low at first, clipped in that way he spoke when he was dealing with unpleasant business. "Celeste," he said by way of greeting, and he must have put the phone on speaker because though I couldn't hear her words clearly, I could hear the sharpness of her tone, a barrage of sound that spilled through even the wood and metal. And then I pushed myself out of bed and shuffled closer. "How's the trip going?" "Good. We're on the yacht now." "Ashar's pride." Her voice trailed off wistfully. "I haven't been on it yet." "You will soon. I'll take you anywhere you want to go, just you and me." Kieran's voice sounded cold and distant, not like he was promising the love of his life a romantic cruise. Celeste's voice sounded lighter. "Good. I can't wait." A loaded pause, and then, "Are you keeping your promise?" "Yes." Kieran sounded like he was gritting his teeth. "Really? You're keeping your distance from her?" I didn't need to wonder who her was. Celeste's cold disdain said it all. And then came the lie. "Yes," Kieran said, "we're keeping our distance. I haven't seen her since we boarded." The words landed like ice in my chest. Celeste's laughter rang faintly, pleased, smug. I imagined her. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect ambition, reclining somewhere with a glass of wine, secure in the knowledge that Kieran Blackthorne belonged to her. "That's good," her voice carried faintly. "I just hope Sarah and Daniel's complication is resolved soon. When you come back, we'll finally officially get engaged. I can't wait, Kieran. I want children. Several. Daniel will love being a big brother, don't you think?" My stomach, already unsettled, lurched violently, not from seasickness this time. At first, Kieran said nothing. "Kai?" Then a harsh chuckle that sounded like it had been wrenched from him. "Yeah, I can't wait." I pressed a hand to my mouth, while burning the back of my throat. So this was what we had come to. This was what our fractured, bitter history had led me back to. Lying in a bed on his ship, listening to him promise a future with someone else. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to despise him with the kind of fury that burned clean through the bones. But beneath the anger was something softer, something far more dangerous. It hurt. It hurt that for the first time he had touched me with care, and yet his heart, or whatever passed for it, was already spoken for. It hurt that after all the years of indifference, now he suddenly looked at me as though I mattered, only to step outside and prove I didn't. I sank back against the pillows, closing my eyes tight as tears threatened. The medicine blurred my edges, pulled me under, but not fast enough to drown out the echo of Celeste's voice. "Several children," she had said. The words rang in my skull as the ship rocked me into fitful sleep. The ocean's endless sway as merciless as the words I had overheard, Kieran's pove. Celeste's words clung to me, long after I hung up, like a stain I couldn't scrub out. "We'll finally officially get engaged. I want children, several." She'd rattled them all with such bright certainty, as if my agreement were already carved into stone. And I'd said what Celeste wanted to hear, just to get her off the line. But the moment I'd hung up, I found myself pacing the narrow stretch of deck outside the cabins, restless, the briny wind doing little to cool the uncomfortable heat pressing down on me. I didn't understand why I was feeling this way. Marriage, children, they were all things I wanted with Celeste, so why did the thought make me consider getting seasick medication of my own? Not because I didn't want more children. Gods, I wanted them. A bigger family, a home alive with laughter. But I couldn't understand why the image of Celeste swollen with my child felt wrong. Foreign, hollow. I ran a hand through my hair, letting out a frustrated curse. How could something I'd wanted for so long suddenly leave a sour taste in my mouth? I shook my head. I didn't have to think about this until I went back to LA. Until then, there were other pressing matters to attend to, like making sure Sarah survived this trip. When I finally calmed my raging thoughts down enough to step back inside, I moved toward Sarah's cabin, rehearsing what I might say, what excuse I might give for taking so long. But the words slipped away when I saw her. She was curled on the bed, the medication I'd forced on her lulling her into what looked like an uneasy sleep. Her skin was pale, her hair damp at the temples, but her chest rose and fell steadily. I should have walked out at that moment. She was finally asleep, she didn't need me hovering. Still, I lingered in the doorway, drinking her in. 10 years married to her, and I'd never really looked at her like this. I'd stolen glances before, yes, but I'd been a little blind back then, too wrapped up in duty, too consumed with feeling like I'd been cheated. Celeste had felt like my future, and when I'd been forced to make the difficult choice to marry Sarah instead, I'd felt trapped, punished, and so I'd shoved Sarah into the shadows. I sat at the edge of her bed, careful not to wake her, and let my thoughts drift to what might have been. Daniel will love being a big brother, don't you think? What if Daniel hadn't been our only child? What if I'd given her the family she deserved instead of burying her beneath silence and cold walls? Daniel was my carbon copy. If we had daughters, would they have Sarah's beautiful eyes, her stubborn chin? The ache in my chest startled me, so sharp I had to push myself to my feet and retreat before it swallowed me whole. Musings like these were dangerous. Dangerous and useless. Because there was no chance of them ever coming to pass, I made sure of that the night I looked into Sarah's eyes and asked for a divorce. She had Lucien now. He would give her the happiness I never could. She didn't need me. All I could do was return to my own cabin. Inside, I stripped off my shirt and fell back against the mattress, staring at the polished mahogany ceiling, its gold inlays catching the light like constellations scattered across the cabin. Although twice as large, the room was almost exactly like Sarah's, except for one thing. She wasn't here with me. I groaned and closed my eyes, hoping I could fall asleep and shove all these dangerous thoughts to the darkest recesses of my mind. But then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. When I picked it up and saw who the message was from, it took all my willpower not to launch the device across the room, or out the open window into the depths of Exuma Sound. I swiped it open and froze. Celeste had sent me an old photograph. Her caption read, "We look so adorable in this. We should add it to the family section of our engagement album, don't you think?" I was too busy studying the picture to wonder when I'd agreed to an engagement album. It was one of those family gatherings from years ago, before the mess of the blood moon hunt, when our families were still really close, and I believed Celeste hung the stars in the sky. She was radiant in the center, of course, posed just so. For as long as I'd known Celeste, she'd always been the center of attention, like the sun around which everything orbited. But my gaze didn't stick to her. In the corner of the frame, almost out of sight, was Sarah, half-turned mid-laugh, caught in motion. Despite their minor resemblance, Sarah had always been her younger sister's polar opposite, quiet, muted, like she dwelled in her own private universe. I'd always been intrigued by her. Ethan was my best friend, and both our families were constantly matching me and Celeste together. Sarah had remained an enigma, soft-spoken, either ridiculed or ignored. And yet, I shook my head, focusing on the picture. It was one of the rare times I'd seen her smile, and it was so different from the perfect, polished smile Celeste wore. Sarah's was not staged, not performed, pure. And there was something in her eyes, light, clear, achingly familiar, that pulled me under. I stared and stared and stared, unable to look away until sleep finally claimed me, dragging me backward in time. I was 17 again, shoulders still broadening, the weight of my father's pack not yet heavy on me. It was a warm summer evening at the training yard, back when everything still felt simpler, and all that mattered to me was being the strongest and fastest among the other wolves my age. Celeste was in the center, as always, flawless, commanding attention without even trying, even when she was barely getting through the training drills. Everyone's eyes were on her, including mine, but then, for a second, my attention wavered. Across the yard was Sarah. Her hair had loosened in the humidity, strands sticking to her temple as she moved with quiet determination. She was at the very edge of the training field, ostracized there because she was smaller, weaker, wolfless. But something curious lit up in me as I watched her run drills with makeshift equipment. She might have been different, but her spirit was stubborn. She was determined. I didn't realize how intensely I'd been watching her until she stumbled, skinning her knee, and my breath hitched. The others laughed, someone calling out a scathing taunt. "Careful, Serafina, you know you don't have wolf healing, right?" Without even thinking about it, I crossed to her and offered my hand. She brushed the dirt off her palm and took my hand hesitantly, whispering a thank you, so soft I almost missed it. Then her eyes lifted to mine, and for a moment it was like something indescribably powerful had been seared into me. The dream shifted, years blurring, snippets of Sarah always on the edge of my vision. Her bent over a book in the library, lips moving silently. Her sneaking a sweet roll from the kitchen when she thought no one was looking. Her voice joining a pack prayer, soft but steady. Always there, always overlooked except by me. And then, that night, the dream painted it vivid, more vivid than memory itself. I was 21, gone a little wild with moonberry wine. I'd been looking for a room to sleep it off in when I saw her in the hallway. She was cornered by some drunk fool, a beta wolf I vaguely recognized attending the blood moon hunt, who thought her meekness meant she was easy prey. "Oh, come on," he was slurring. "At least your sister has a reason to play hard to get. You should be grateful I'm giving you any attention." Rage flared in me even now, even in the dream. I didn't hesitate. My boot connected with his ribs, sending him sprawling, whimpering as he scrambled away. When I turned to her, Sarah was pressed against the wall, eyes wide, looking both startled and relieved. And when our gazes locked, I forgot every reason that existed for why she wasn't the one for me. I stepped closer, too close. My hand brushed her cheek, testing, asking. She didn't move away. She looked so beautiful that night, her hair spilling across her shoulders like flaxen silk. The glow of the full moon painted ethereal shadows across her face, igniting her eyes like sea glass. And then I kissed her. The dream didn't hold back. It filled in everything I'd forced myself to bury. The heat of her mouth, the tremor in her fingers as she clutched my shirt, the way her breath hitched when I pressed her against the door of the room she'd been standing in front of. We tumbled inside, clothes discarded with the speed of light. The world narrowed to the burn of her skin against mine, the soft sounds she made, the way she arched into me as if she'd been waiting a long time for this. I had her beneath me all night. I couldn't stop. Didn't want to. It wasn't careful. It wasn't restrained. It was raw, desperate, hungry. Every barrier that existed between us was torn apart with each kiss, each gasp, each thrust, each time she whispered my name like a secret too sacred to share. Even in the dream I knew, no one had ever felt like this. No one ever would. Serafina's Pove. The first thing I registered when I woke was the absence of motion. The violent rocking of yesterday, the waves pitching me into nausea, into that medicated haze, into Kieran's arms, was gone. The yacht had stilled into something softer, more docile. Only the faint hum of the engines and the muffled slap of water against the hull reminded me we were still cutting through the waters of Exuma Sound. I sat up gingerly, bracing to see if my stomach would betray me again, but the queasiness had ebbed to a dull echo. My head throbbed faintly, like I'd woken from a night of drinking. A knock sounded at my cabin door. I dragged myself out of bed and smoothened my clothes before trudging to the door, hoping it was Kieran and wishing it wasn't. "Lady Serafina?" It was one of the crew members, a young man with a sunburnt nose and two wide eyes. "Forgive the intrusion, but..." He hesitated, shifting his weight. We can't seem to reach Alpha Kieran." My brows furrowed. "Reach him?" He nodded quickly. "We've tried his radio, the intercom. No response. No one's seen him since last night, and we're about to dock." The men are, his throat bobbed, concerned. Concerned, but not enough to check. Of course not. Who would dare enter the Alpha's room uninvited? Not when a single wrong step could earn them a broken neck. "I'll see to him," I murmured, grabbing a fancy robe hooked by my bed. The corridor smelled faintly of polished wood and salt, the air-conditioned chill fighting the Bahamian heat outside. At the end of the hall, Kieran's door loomed. It was easy to tell that it was his, larger, darker, guarded even in its silence. I knocked. Once, twice, louder. Nothing. "Typical," I muttered under my breath, and reached for the spare key the crew member had procured. It was almost comical how terrified he'd been to give it to me, lest he incur Kieran's wrath, but after I promised he wouldn't swim with the fishes anytime soon, he relinquished it. The lock clicked softly, and before I gave myself time to think about all the reasons why this was a bad fucking idea, I slipped inside. The curtains were drawn against the morning sun, the room heavy with shadows and the faint tang of sweat. For a heartbeat, panic sliced through me. Kieran was sprawled across the bed, motionless, too still. But then his chest rose, rapid and erratic, and my pulse eased. Kieran Blackthorn, feared alpha of Nightfang Pack, lay tangled in sheets like any mortal man. His hair was mussed, his brow damp, his lips parted like he was making an unspoken plea. I'd confirmed he was alive. I should have left at that moment, just closed the door, let him wallow in whatever fantasies kept him tethered to sleep. But something, maybe the remnants of last night's fragile tenderness, maybe plain foolishness, kept me rooted. Even worse, I crept closer, leaning over him. His lashes flickered. His lips moved around a name I couldn't hear. Kieran Blackthorn truly was a beautiful man. Women paid hundreds of dollars for lashes like his that cast shadows on his chiseled cheekbones, softening the severity of a face that had once turned cold every time it turned to me. His mouth, those lips that had spoken vows he never meant, was infuriatingly perfect, sculpted in temptation even when parted in something as innocent as sleep. I hated how easily I could imagine them on my skin, how my body remembered the press of them even when my mind wanted to forget. His jaw, sharp and stubborn, carried the same arrogance he wore awake, yet the faint stubble caught the light in a way that almost gentled him. Almost. Because even in this vulnerable state he radiated power, alpha, unshaken, untouchable. But those lashes fluttered faintly, caught in whatever dream had his longing written across his face, and I knew it wasn't me he reached for in his sleep. That realization burned hotter than any flame, reminding me just how foolish I could be when it came to Kieran. Then, suddenly, his eyes opened. And what I saw there wasn't anger. It wasn't suspicion or command. It was that very longing. Raw, unmasked. My stomach tightened, colder now than any seasickness. Celeste, of course, he must have been dreaming of her, of their sweet little call I'd overheard yesterday. Her coy voice, her talk of children, his reassurances. The memory curdled inside me, scalding away whatever softness last night had planted. I straightened, the air between us frosting over. "You're awake," I said flatly. He blinked, slow, disoriented. "Sarah, I'll leave you to it." I turned, already stepping away, but his voice snapped sharper. "Wait." I froze back rigid before slowly pivoting. His gaze was clearer now, pinned on me with something I didn't dare to name. He was looking at me like I was simultaneously the answer to every question he'd ever asked, and the questions themselves. I didn't like the heat that looked seared over my skin, so I forced my mouth open to break the tension that was beginning to form. "I didn't mean to overhear your call yesterday," I said quickly. "But if you and Celeste are planning to have a child, then at least have the decency to speak with Daniel first. He doesn't deserve to be blindsided, hurt, cast aside." But those felt like my feelings, not Daniel's. "Disappointed again," I finished. The words tasted like ash, but saying them, steady and cold, felt like the only shield I had left. Kieran pushed himself up from the bed, sheets sliding down his torso, his expression unreadable. My breath stilled at the sight of his toned torso, glistening with sweat like a basted turkey. My stomach churned with a hunger that couldn't be satiated by food. I needed to get out of here. But before I could retreat, he moved. Fast. I found my back pressed to the wall, Kieran's body caging me in. His scent hit me first, cedarwood and storm air, familiar enough to weaken my knees if I let it. His eyes burned, too close, too intent. "That's it," His voice was low, roughened from sleep. "That's your only reaction? To tell me to talk to our son?" My chin lifted, jaw set. What else should I say? His nostrils flared. "What do you expect me to do? Weep, beg, throw myself at you? You once said Celeste was the only woman you wanted as the mother of your children," I reminded him, each word sharp as broken glass. "So tell me, Kieran, what game are you playing now?" His grip tightened on the wall beside my head. "You think this is a game?" "I think," I shot back, "that you should stop tormenting me with your confusion. Choose her. Choose me. Choose anyone. But don't stand here acting like I should feel something other than relief, that you'll finally give Daniel a sibling, even if it's a half one." That was when he snapped. His mouth crashed against mine, fierce, unrelenting, a storm I hadn't braced for. Heat flared, scorching straight to my core, dragging me back to memories I'd barely managed to bury, emotions I still didn't fucking understand. For a heartbeat, just one, I almost kissed him back. Almost. But maybe I was more clear-headed at sea than on land. In a trophy-worthy show of restraint, my teeth sank into his lower lip, sharp enough to draw a startled grunt. I shoved him hard, breath ragged as he stumbled back a step. "Don't." My voice shook, but I forced steel into it. I glared at a spot on the plush carpet between his bare feet. "Don't lose your mind, Kieran. Not now. Not here. Not again." His hand caught my wrist, but I twisted free, stepping out of reach. My heart thundered and I couldn't bring myself to face him squarely. "The ship's about to dock," I said, cold as I could manage. "Daniel will be waiting on shore. I won't have him see us like this, at each other's throats, or worse. Because the alternative, this maddening dance between desire and contempt, was worse. And I won't give anyone on this yacht reason to whisper rumors." Kieran's jaw worked, teeth clenched, eyes dark with a hunger I refused to acknowledge, even if that same hunger also pulsed through me, as undeniable as my heartbeat. I held my ground. I won't passively accept things the way I once did. "Keep your distance, Alpha." The title was deliberate, slicing between us. Without waiting for his reply, I strode to the door, spine stiff. My hands trembled, but I didn't let him see. The sunlight on deck was blinding, glittering across turquoise waters that stretched endlessly around us. Ahead the dock loomed, and beyond it, blessedly, my son, Daniel, stood next to a bodyguard, waving as soon as he spotted me. His little face lit up, and something inside me cracked wide open. "Mom," he shouted, his voice carrying across the water. I barely heard the engines rumble down or the shouts of the crew preparing lines. The moment the yacht touched the dock, I was already moving, down the gangway, across the last stretch of wood, and into his arms. Daniel barreled into me, nearly knocking me off balance with the force of his hug. I sank to my knees, wrapping him tight, inhaling the warm, familiar scent of my boy. "I missed you so much," I whispered into his hair, voice breaking. He squeezed me back, his little arms fierce. "Me too." For that moment, for as long as I held him, nothing else mattered. Kieran's Poviv. The Blackthorn name meant something in every corner of the world, but here, on my island, it meant ownership. Musha Cay stretched before us in glimmering white sand and crystalline turquoise shallows, the kind of paradise people paid hundreds of thousands to rent for a weekend. Palms bent in the trade winds, manicured pathways gleamed like something out of a resort brochure, and discreet cameras tracked every angle. Sentinels sworn to protect my son with their lives stood at invisible checkpoints, blending into the foliage, their presence silent but absolute. The yacht had docked smoothly, crew jumping to secure lines. I stepped onto the pier with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 100 times, but my eyes weren't on the scenery or the staff lined up in crisp uniforms. They were on her. Serafina. She was kneeling, Daniel's arms around her neck as though he'd never let go. Our son's laughter carried over the water, bright and unguarded, tugging at something deep inside me. His bright eyes looked at her as though she were his whole world. For the first time, I could see the toll their separation must have had on them, and guilt knotted in my stomach. I knew I should join them, hug Daniel, and reunite with my family. But something kept me rooted to the spot until Daniel's voice reached me. "Dad?" Truth be told, I'd been a little concerned about Daniel's reaction when he saw me, considering the strain on our relationship these last couple of months. But that concern melted away under the warmth of his bright smile as he pulled away from Sarah and barreled straight into me, his laughter ringing out. I caught him mid-sprint, lifting him off the dock as he wrapped his arms tight around my neck. My chest clenched as I pressed a kiss to his hair, inhaling the sun-warmed scent of him. "Missed you, champ." "I missed you more," he declared, pulling back to grin widely at me. Behind him, Sarah stood a step back. She looked composed, chin lifted, but the faint stiffness in her posture betrayed her. Her hands smoothed Daniel's shirt even as she watched me hold him, something unreadable flickering across her face. Before I could linger on it, the familiar perfume of my mother's roses swept in. "Kieran," she breathed, her arms open wide as she came toward me. I set Daniel down just as my mother reached me. She wrapped me in an embrace that, despite her elegance, still carried the unyielding strength of a Luna. "My son, you look." Her astute gray eyes narrowed. "Tired." "I'm fine, Mother," I assured, forcing a faint smile. "Fine," my father repeated, his voice rougher, skeptical as he came up beside me. He clasped my shoulder in a grip that was both steadying and scrutinizing. His sharp eyes scanned me as if reading the truth beneath my skin. "You've lost weight." "I haven't," I said smoothly. "The sea air isn't kind, that's all." My mother cupped my cheek, frowning. "Tell me, how are things with the pack? And," her pause was deliberate, too deliberate, "with Celeste?" I felt Sarah's gaze on me, though she pretended to be occupied adjusting Daniel's collar. "Things with the pack are stable," I said, voice even. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with. As for Celeste," I kept my tone clipped, measured, giving nothing more than what courtesy demanded. "She's fine." My mother arched a brow, not satisfied. My father crossed his arms, his silence heavier than words. I cocked my head slightly, a little put off by their countenance. They'd always been huge supports of Celeste. Why were they acting so off? "Mom," Daniel piped up suddenly, bouncing on his heels as he gripped her hand. "I want to show you everything. Come on." Sarah's lips pulled into a beautiful, bright smile. And the thought that she'd never directed that kind of smile my way made my chest twist. She let him tug at her hand, casting me a brief, unreadable glance before letting Daniel lead her down the path. I watched them go, hand in hand, Daniel's little voice full of pride as he played tour guide. The twisting in my chest sharpened and deepened. My mother followed my gaze, then returned her eyes to me, sharper now. "He adores her," she said simply. "That child hasn't smiled like that in weeks." "She's his mother," I replied, my voice coming out slightly hoarse. She nodded and remarked casually, almost conversational, "Serafina raised him well. He's an amazing child." "He is." And I knew I could take none of the credit. Daniel was an amazing child because Serafina was an amazing mother, simple as that. She'd given him all the love and care she had lacked. She hadn't seen our family as a trap or some sort of punishment for our mistake. She genuinely tried to make the best of her new life. And I made that life a cold hell. And now that she was free of me, I didn't even have the decency to back off. I'd dreamed of her last night, her touch, her lips. I'd woken with a hunger I had no right to feel, kissed her with a recklessness that belonged to another man entirely. And she'd bitten me, shoved me away with steel in her voice. "Keep your distance, Alpha." My jaw tightened. "I'm going with them," I announced lowly. "Please see to it that our luggage is deposited in our rooms." I didn't wait for my mother's reply as I took off down the path, but her knowing glance lingered, as tangible as the heat of the sun on my neck. The island unfolded in luxury as Daniel tugged Sarah from one marvel to the next. He wanted to show her everything. The glass-bottomed lagoon where stingrays drifted, the infinity pool that spilled into the sea, the shell-shaped cabanas scattered along the private coves. His little voice bubbled with excitement, narrating details only a child would notice. How the hammock swung higher, if you kicked just right. How the butler always brought him coconut water with a straw shaped like a dolphin. How the sand crabs scurried sideways like they were racing each other. Sarah listened to every word, crouching down to his level, laughing when he grabbed her hand to pull her faster along the white sand paths. Her hair caught the sunlight, her smile bright but fragile, like she was afraid to let herself bask too much in this fleeting peace. And me, I followed at a distance, watching, wanting, regretting. I should have been at her other side, holding her free hand. I should have been making her laugh, putting smiles on her face. But the only look I ever put on her face was the conflicted loathing, like the one she'd worn back in my cabin when I'd kissed her. Finally, the sight got too much, the ache in my chest too painful, so I retired to my room. Much later, when the sun had begun its descent and painted the sky in bruised purples and molten gold, I went looking for Daniel. The staff had retreated, dinner preparations underway, and the island quieted with the lull of evening. I followed the sound of voices down a winding trail that led to a small pavilion by the water, and then her voice stopped me in my tracks. "I know, sweetheart. I know you wish things were different." Daniel's voice wavered, fragile. I still want you and Dad together." The words hit me harder than any blow. I pressed back against the wall, out of sight but able to see their outlined silhouettes. Sarah's tone was gentle, patient, steady as the tide. "I understand, my love. Truly I do. But sometimes parents can't be together the way children wish. It doesn't mean we don't love you. Nothing will ever change that." There was a pause, broken only by the lap of waves against the shore. Then Daniel, quieter. Did he hurt you? Because of Celeste?" My breath locked, shame burned hot under my skin. What kind of monster had I painted myself out to be that my son would even ask that kind of question? But Sarah, God's bless her, didn't falter. "Danny, baby, your dad would never ever hurt me." Something inside me swelled at the conviction in her voice. She didn't sound like she was only trying to convince him. She sounded like she truly believed that. "I don't mean like that," Daniel replied, sniffling. "I mean, did he make you sad?" I clenched a fist, deflating at that question. I knew she wouldn't be able to answer with the same conviction. There were worse ways to hurt someone other than physically. Sarah exhaled, tucking a strand of wind-blown hair behind his ear. "Daniel, there are things adults do that children don't need to bother themselves with. What matters is this: I'm strong enough to take care of myself, and I'll never let anyone hurt me, or you, ever again." Her words sank into me like a stone dropped into deep water. Strong enough. She was right. Serafina was stronger than I'd ever given her credit for. All those years I'd told myself she was fragile, dependent, easy to dismiss. Convenient lies. Daniel sniffled. "But I don't want you to be alone." Sarah pressed a kiss to his forehead, holding him close. "I'm not alone. I have you, and you have both of us. Even if Dad and I aren't together, we'll always be your family. Always. Always." The word burrowed deep within me, offsetting an ache that suddenly made it hard to breathe. I slipped away before they could spot me, my chest tight, my thoughts louder than the crashing surf. I'd told myself for years that Sarah was the mistake, that Celeste was the dream. But standing on the balcony overlooking the endless sweep of the Caribbean, I couldn't escape the truth clawing through me. Sarah had raised our son with patience I'd never mastered. She had endured the chill of a marriage where my affection never reached her, not because she lacked the strength to leave, but because she refused to let Daniel grow up in the shadow of our mistake. And I'd been the child, petulant, sullen, blind. When I closed my eyes, I saw her again, the way she'd looked at me this morning when I'd kissed her, fire and hunger colliding in that one perfect, devastating instant. Her lips had trembled under mine, her breath had caught, she'd wanted me. For one reckless heartbeat, she had wanted me. And then she'd pushed me away. For Daniel, for herself, for the self-respect I'd burned years ago. The sting of her bite still lingered on my lips, the taste of her on my tongue, a phantom I couldn't chase away. My body ached with the memory of her pressed against me, even as my mind screamed at the impossibility of it. Celeste's name whispered through my conscience, cold and accusing. The future I'd once promised her now looked like a hollow shell compared to the fierce, unyielding longing I felt every time I looked at Sarah. Which woman did I truly want? The one I'd convinced myself was my salvation? Or the one I'd cast aside only to find years later that she was a hidden gem I'd never been bothered to unearth? I dragged a hand over my face, every nerve thrumming with confusion. I wanted to storm back to that pavilion, to tell Daniel the truth, to beg Sarah to look at me the way she had once long ago before everything curdled between us. But I didn't, because she'd told me to keep my distance. And for once in my damned life, I had to respect her boundary, even if it killed me. Mushake was supposed to be paradise. Tonight, it felt like purgatory, Serafina's Pove. I woke to the muted hush of the ocean. The sound was steady, rhythmic, as though the entire island breathed in and out in sync with me. For a moment, I lay still on the wide, soft bed, the gauzy curtains swaying with the salt-tinged breeze that slipped in through the open balcony doors. Beyond them, Musha Cay glowed with early sunlight, the horizon painted in coral and rose. Daniel's laughter from the night before lingered in my head, clear and bright like wind chimes. The memory pulled me upright, shoulders heavy with sleep, yet warmed by the thought of spending the day with my baby. Dinner last night had been awkward. Kieran's parents trying too hard to make small talk, Kieran himself brooding behind polite restraint. The only light, as usual, had been Daniel, chattering about surfing, about the villa, about how much better coconuts tasted here than anywhere else in the world. If Daniel was happy, then I was happy. That mantra had carried me through worse nights than last. Still, the air in the dining room had been thick, and I had felt Kieran's eyes on me too many times, a heat that pricked the skin at the nape of my neck. I'd forced myself to focus on Daniel's joy, telling myself that his smile mattered more than my discomfort. I slipped from the bed, pulling a silk robe around me, its fabric cool against my skin, as I headed into the bathroom. After a shower, I braided my damp hair loosely over one shoulder and changed into pale blue linen shorts and a white loose blouse before stepping out into the hall. The villa was extravagant in every corner, polished teak floors, whitewashed walls, orchids blooming in vases, but its beauty didn't hide the coldness that lingered in its halls. "Where's Daniel?" I asked one of the Omegas, a young woman who carried a tray of fresh fruit past me. She smiled, bowing slightly. "At the beach with Alpha Kieran, ma'am. They went out just after sunrise." Something inside me flickered, equal parts relief and unease. Daniel was safe, yes, but with Kieran. If I wanted to spend any time with my son, I'd have to spend time with his father, too. Lovely. I followed the winding path lined with hibiscus until the sand warmed my feet. The morning light glittered across the sea, waves rolling in a hypnotic rhythm. Then I saw them. Daniel, standing unsteady but determined on a surfboard, Kieran steadying him with a firm hand on his back. Daniel whooped with laughter as he wobbled, nearly falling before regaining his balance. Kieran laughed too, the sound startlingly warm, echoing across the water. I froze at the edge of the palms, my breath caught. They looked like a family. I should have felt nothing but gladness, but envy twisted sharp in my chest. Not of Daniel's joy, that was mine, too, but of the ease Kieran seemed to find with him. The ease he'd never had with me. Daniel spotted me first. "Mom!" His voice cracked with excitement, his arm shooting up in a wave that nearly toppled him into the surf. "Come see. I'm showing Dad my surfing moves." Someone needed to come up with a different term for kids to refer to divorced parents. Hearing Daniel call us Dad and Mom as if we were one happy family scraped raw at me. Kieran turned then, his gaze meeting mine across the water. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just his eyes. The memory of his mouth on mine on the yacht still seared into me. I tore my gaze away, forcing a smile as Daniel hopped off the board and splashed toward me. "You have to try," he insisted, water streaming off him as he tugged my hand. "Come on, Mom, you'll love it. I can teach you." I laughed, though my stomach fluttered with nerves. "You? Teach me?" "Of course," Daniel said proudly, puffing up his chest. "Dad says I'm a natural." Kieran's voice carried over the waves. He's not wrong. I ignored the way my skin prickled at his carefree tone and allowed Daniel to drag me into the surf. The water surged cool around my ankles, then my knees. I bit back my fear of water, trying to focus on the wet sand beneath my toes, the sound of Daniel's voice and Kieran's presence, however uncomfortable, behind me. Anything other than the vast body of water that stretched endlessly before me. Daniel pushed a smaller board toward me, one clearly sized for beginners. "Okay, Mom," he said, earnest as a little soldier, "you have to lie down first, like this." He demonstrated with exaggerated seriousness, then popped back up. "And when the wave comes, you push up with your arms and stand. Easy." "Easy," I echoed, though I doubted it. Daniel beamed and glanced back at Kieran. "See? She'll get it. She always does. Mom's the best at everything she does." Something in my chest softened at his faith in me, even as heat coiled low when I caught Kieran watching. His expression was unreadable, but I felt it, his attention, his awareness of me in the water. I tried, failing spectacularly the first time, the board tipping sideways and dunking me into the surf. Daniel's laughter rang out. "You're supposed to stay on top, Mom." "I gathered that," I sputtered, pushing my wet hair out of my face with a nervous laugh. I was fine. I couldn't drown in such shallow water. I was fine. I was fine. I was fine. Kieran's voice came closer now, calm and instructive. "Shift your weight to the center. Don't fight the wave. Ride with it." I didn't look at him, but I listened. Little by little, I improved. My arms ached, my legs trembled, but I was determined to get this right, if not for anything, then for Daniel. And when I finally caught a wave and managed to rise halfway before tumbling, Daniel cheered as though I'd won a medal. "You did it," he shouted, clapping. "See, Mom? You're amazing." And for a fleeting moment, I believed him. But the ocean evidently did not share the same sentiment. I didn't see the larger wave coming until it reared up, shadowing the water around me. Panic flickered, but I tried to follow Daniel's instructions, pushing up onto the board. The force of it hit harder than I expected, slamming into me, knocking the breath from my chest. The world turned into white spray and salt. "Sarah! Mom!" I surfaced once, gasped, then the next surge dragged me under. My lungs burned, limbs thrashing against the pull. A familiar terror stole over me in the spinning blue, an old memory of pain, of surrender. "Not again, not again." Then hands gripped me, strong and unyielding, nothing like the cruel hands that had once shoved me under. I clung to them like life rafts. I thought I heard Daniel shouting, but everything was muffled, distant. My chest ached. Darkness crept at the edges of my vision, muted my hearing. "Sarah!" Kieran's voice was raw with urgency. "Stay with me. Sarah, open your eyes." I couldn't. The world tilted again, and then sand pressed beneath me. Large, warm hands cradled my face, water dripping onto my skin. "Mom?" Daniel's voice broke, panicked. I felt his little hand on my arm. "Dad, do something! She's not breathing! Give her mouth to mouth!" His plea sliced through me, even in the haze. I wanted to open my eyes to tell him not to be afraid. But all I could do was drift while Kieran cursed under his breath. For one suspended moment, I felt the ghost of his breath near mine. The charged hesitation of his lips hovered above. Daniel's voice trembled again. "Please, Dad, save her." Kieran's POV. The wave closed over Sarah, and for a heartbeat, I froze. 1 second, she was laughing, her hair whipped back, her hands clumsy but determined on the board, and the next, the ocean swallowed her whole. "Sarah." My voice tore from my chest, ragged, but the sea didn't care. Daniel's scream was sharper, higher pitched. "Mom." I dove without thinking, cutting into the water like instinct. The salt burned my eyes, but none of it mattered. I'd always trusted the sea. It was familiar, dependable, steady, but in that moment, it felt like an enemy, dragging Sarah down, greedy for her. When I found her, her hair was streaming like dark ribbons around her face, her eyes closed, her limbs slack, too still, too quiet. The sight carved into me with the precision of a surgical blade. No, not Sarah, not like this. I hauled her up, my arms straining, lungs burning as I dragged her back toward the surface. I felt her grip dig into my arm, and I would have exhaled in relief if there was any air left in my lungs. Every second stretched longer than it should have, a cruel delay between the depth and the air. By the time I hit the shallows, Daniel was already knee-deep. Panic etched into his face. "Dad, do something!" His voice cracked. "She's not breathing. Give her mouth to mouth." I lay her flat on the sand, my chest heaving, even as hers stayed still. Her skin was cold, her lips pale. "Sarah, come on, come back to me." My hands shook as I tilted her head back, and I paused as I hovered over her lips, remembering the last time we'd kissed. The taste of her, the way her lips softened under mine. But this wasn't a kiss. Not really, but my body didn't care. Desperation, heat, memory, all clashed inside me. "Please, Dad." The raw terror in Daniel's voice snapped me back to reality. "Save her." Without giving myself any more time to second guess, I leaned forward, sealing my lips over Sarah's. I frantically forced air into her lungs, praying she'd take it, praying she'd come back. Her lips were softer than I remembered, warmer, even against the chill of the ocean. Focus. Damn it. After 2 breaths, I pulled back, and my palms pressed hard against her chest, the rhythm instinctive, counting under my breath, 30 compressions, steady and desperate, willing her heart to answer me. When she didn't stir, I tilted her head back and pressed my mouth over hers again. "Please," I begged internally as I breathed into her. "I can't lose you, Sarah. Not like this." Daniel hovered at my side, his voice trembling. Is it working? Dad, is it working? Give me a second, I muttered, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might burst. I pressed my mouth to hers again, pushing harder, fighting the terror clawing at me. Then she coughed. The sound was violent, wet, alive, and I'd never heard anything so beautiful in my life. Water spewed from her lips, splattering against my cheek, and relief hit me so hard I almost collapsed. Before I could stop myself, I cradled her face in my hands, my thumbs brushing the cold droplets clinging to her skin. "Sarah," I breathed, my voice sounding scraped raw. Her lashes fluttered, her gaze hazy and unfocused as she blinked up at me. For one suspended second, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of us, her fragile breaths against my palms, the tremor of life shuddering back into her body, and the unbearable hope surging in my chest. Her lips parted as if to speak, confusion chasing across her expression, and my chest tightened at the sight. My name hovered at the edge of her tongue, or maybe it was just wishful thinking. I wanted her to lean on me, to cling to me like she'd done in the water, to need me even for a moment. But clarity snapped back into her eyes like the crack of a whip. She stiffened beneath me, her hands trembling as she pushed weakly at my chest. The rejection was small, unsteady, but resolute. "I'm fine," she rasped, coughing again, dragging herself upright even as her body swayed. "Mom." "Danny." He wrapped his arms around her tightly. "Oh, I was so scared, Mom." She reached up, a hand clinging to his arm, laying her head against his as she shivered. "It's okay, baby," she whispered hoarsely. "I'm okay." "You're shivering," he noted, pulling away. "I'll go get a towel." With that, he shot to his feet and ran to the small cabana in the distance. Sarah watched him go, and then sighed, turning back to me. I reached out to her. "Sarah, are you?" She flinched away from my touch, and my hand dropped into my lap, folding into a fist, my gaze lowering. That's when I saw it. Her wet white shirt was plastered against her skin, practically transparent in the sunlight. And there it was, the outline of her bra, the delicate pink lace clinging to every curve. My throat closed, heat flashing low in my body. Damn it. Not now. Not when she had nearly drowned. And yet I couldn't stop the surge of want, inappropriate and raw, cutting through the adrenaline. I forced my eyes up, away, anywhere but the swell of her chest beneath that soaked fabric. Sarah caught me looking. Her eyes widened, and a flush rose across her cheeks, deeper than the sunburn blooming there. She folded her arms over her chest, hugging herself tightly. I opened my mouth to speak, to apologize, maybe, or explain, but she was already pushing herself to her feet as Daniel returned with a large towel. I should get lunch started," she muttered, voice frayed. She took the towel from Daniel, smiling softly. "You two stay here." Daniel reached for her, worry clouding his expression. "Mom?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," she said more gently, ruffling his damp hair. "Stay and play with your dad. I'll call you when lunch is ready." And just like that, she turned, wrapping the thick towel around her, leaving me kneeling in the sand with my chest still heaving and my pulse refusing to calm. I had saved her. But I had also lost something again. Something I hadn't even realized I was still chasing. By the time I came down from my room for lunch, the table on the terrace was already set. The scent hit me first. Fresh herbs, garlic, something citrusy layered beneath the salt of the sea breeze. My stomach twisted, not just from hunger, but from the memory of Sarah slipping under the waves that morning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her limp in my arms. Now she stood by the table, arranging serving spoons as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Her hair was still damp, from the ocean or a shower, I didn't know, darker at the ends where it brushed her shoulders, and she'd changed into another soft blouse and shorts, her skin sun-kissed from the morning. The spread was too much. Grilled fish, seasoned just the way my father liked it, with lime and pepper. A salad with roasted walnuts and cranberries, my mother's favorite. Even the rice had the crispy fried shallots Daniel loved crunching on. And for me, a steak, cooked rare, exactly how I preferred, though she'd once told me she couldn't stand the sight of red on a plate. For a moment none of us spoke. My parents exchanged a glance, one I couldn't quite decipher. Daniel, of course, broke the silence, clapping his hands and bouncing into his chair. "Mom, you made all of this?" His voice cracked with excitement. She chuckled. "Hey, you said you missed my cooking." "But you didn't have to cook for us too, dear," my mother said softly. Sarah shrugged, not looking at her, busying herself with pouring Daniel coconut water into his dolphin straw. Old habits die hard, I guess. An unpleasant memory flashed in my head. Daniel's birthday. Sarah slaving away in the kitchen, making 7 different dishes to cater to everyone's niche tastes. Not a single thank you in return. My chest clenched. Daniel beamed. Can we eat now, please? Of course, baby. I caught myself staring at her hands as she served him first, making sure his plate was colorful, balanced, because she knew that was the only way to keep him interested long enough to finish it all. She didn't even look my way as she moved around the table, silent, graceful, careful not to take up too much space. And that hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd let myself believe she was cold, aloof, that she sat at my table out of obligation, not care. But watching her now, I remembered how I used to ignore little details like this, how she'd once tried to do the same thing, cater to tastes I never acknowledged, tried to find common ground with me, involve herself in pack activities. I hadn't seen her efforts then. Maybe I hadn't wanted to. Daniel dug in noisily, humming with delight as he chewed. My father actually smiled. My mother murmured her thanks. And me? I found myself gripping the fork as if it were the only thing keeping me steady. Because the truth was unavoidable. Sarah didn't just prepare lunch. She reminded all of us without a word of the place she'd always deserved at this table. In this family. And it was me, always me, who had denied it to her. Serafina's Pove. Daniel was warm in my arms when I tucked the covers around him later that night. Mom? His voice was small, barely above a whisper. His lashes fluttered as though he were already half asleep, but I knew my son. His mind never rested easily. Yes, love? I smoothed his hair back, needing the steady rhythm of the motion more than he did. Are you okay? His dark eyes blinked open, wide and searching. The question hit deeper than I expected, pulling tight against the ache I'd carried all day. I hesitated. My throat still felt raw from the water I'd swallowed, from the moment everything had gone black under the sea. And behind my ribs, my heart kept replaying the terrifying seconds between sinking and waking, only to find myself nestled under Kieran, his mouth pressed to mine. The memory burned like a brand. The way his breath had rushed into me, the way his hands had trembled as though he feared he might lose me. I forced the it down, pushing it deep where Daniel couldn't see it in my eyes. I'm fine, I told him, the lie tasting like the salt of the ocean. Just a little shaken, sweetheart. His mouth curved into a sleepy smile. Good, 'cause I don't like it when you scare me. I laughed softly, though the sound broke around the edges. I'll try not to make a habit of it. He reached out, catching my hand. His fingers were small but strong, his grip stubborn in that way he'd inherited from his father. You were with us all day, he murmured, already drifting. It was the best. My heart squeezed. He wasn't wrong. Despite the near tragedy, the rest of the day after lunch had been something rare, something beautiful. I'd never been part of the Blackthorn family vacations before. They'd always gone without me. Kieran, Daniel, Leona, Christian, the perfect picture. And me? I was the invisible mother, the shadow left behind, the woman whose absence no one seemed to notice. But today had been different. Daniel's laughter had carried over the beach, ringing brighter than the gulls. He'd made sure we stayed away from the ocean, but he'd dragged me from the shade to show me seashells. We'd built sandcastles, chased crabs, and Kieran had even let us bury him up to his shoulders in the sand. And despite the lingering tension between me and Kieran, Daniel's joy had spread like wildfire, catching even Leona and Christian in its glow. For the first time, I hadn't felt like an outsider with my own family. I bent and kissed Daniel's forehead, lingering longer than I meant to. Sleep well, my love. He sighed, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm as he finally gave in to slumber. I slipped my hand from his and stood, the soft creak of the mattress marking my retreat. The villa was quiet as I padded into the hallway. A warm breeze pushed through the open windows, carrying the scent of sea brine. I was still lost in thought, still reliving the strange, dizzying collision of relief and humiliation on that beach, when a voice startled me. Serafina? I turned, my guard snapping up instinctively. Leona stood at the end of the hall, a shawl drawn loosely around her shoulders, her expression unreadable. Yes? I asked cautiously. She motioned toward the lounge, a quiet alcove with white wicker chairs and a low table set with untouched tea. "Do you have a moment? I'd like to have a chat." Every instinct in me screamed, no. Previous conversations with Leona always ended with me questioning my self-worth and fighting back tears, but politeness, or maybe exhaustion, made me nod. "All right." I followed her into the lounge, the air heavy with the scent of hibiscus and jasmine from the garden beyond. We sat opposite each other, the space between us feeling wider than the ocean outside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, Leona broke the silence, voice soft. "I wanted to ask how you're doing after this morning. That was frightening." I blinked. Genuine concern? From Leona? "Well, it's a general principle of mine not to die by drowning," I said dryly. "But I'm managing." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "You always do." I folded my hands in my lap, wary. "Was there something else?" She looked at me for a long beat, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I wanted to tell you. Daniel is a remarkable boy, bright, kind, grounded. You've done a wonderful job with him, Serafina." The compliment landed like a stone thrown into still water, rippling outward until it unsettled everything in me. My first instinct was suspicion, because kindness from Leona, as rare as a blue moon, had always come with an edge. My second was something I didn't want to name, something dangerously close to longing. How much easier would my life have been if just one of the maternal figures in my life had treated me with kindness instead of contempt? "Thank you," I said stiffly. "But Daniel's goodness is his own." Leona shook her head. "Don't diminish what you've given him. It shows. The way he looks at you, the way he carries himself, he knows he is loved." I shifted uncomfortably, my hands twisting together. This was too strange, too disarming. I wanted to get up, to make an excuse about being tired. But before I could rise, she pressed on. "I've also heard," she said carefully, "that you may have someone new in your life." My jaw tightened. Of course. There it was, the true reason for this midnight conversation. I wasn't even surprised that she'd somehow acquired this information. Her sources were limitless. Maybe Kieran himself even told her. Though the idea of my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law discussing my love life was more unsettling than this conversation. Leona's eyes searched mine. "If that's true, then I'm glad. Truly. You deserve to be happy. You deserve support, love. I hope this works out for you, Sarah." I let out a breath, sharp and humorless. "Forgive me if I don't leap to accept your good wishes." Her brows drew together. "Why?" "Because," I said flatly, "we both know what this is about. You're afraid I'll circle back to Kieran. You're afraid my presence here means something it doesn't. Let me spare you the anxiety. I'm not here to reclaim him. I've moved on. I have friends. I have someone who cares for me. My life now is so much better than it was as Kieran's wife. I'm happy now. Content." Leona's face tightened, but I didn't stop. The words, once started, poured out like a tide I couldn't hold back. "The only bond between me and your family now is Daniel. That's it. Whatever choices Kieran makes about his future, about who he wants to marry or start a new family with, that's none of my business. I won't pry. I won't interfere. I've let go." Silence filled the lounge, heavy and crushing. Leona's gaze held mine, sharp and searching, but I didn't flinch. For once, I refused to. I rose, smoothing my hands down the sides of my shorts, eager to end this charade. "If that's all, Leona, I'll take my leave. Good night." I turned and froze. Kieran stood at the doorway. His frame filled it, broad shoulders shadowed by the dim light spilling from the hall, his eyes unreadable and piercing, locked on me. I couldn't tell how long he had been standing there or how much he had heard, but my pulse stuttered all the same. Kieran's pove. I hadn't meant to linger in the doorway. I hadn't meant to listen. But the moment Sarah's voice drifted into the hall, something in me stilled. Her words cut deeper than I'd expected. "I'm not here to reclaim him. I've moved on. I have friends. I have someone who cares for me. My life now is so much better than it was as Kieran's wife. I'm happy now. Content." Each sentence felt like a nail hammered into my chest. I should have been relieved. This was what I'd once wanted, wasn't it? Distance. Separation, an ending to the miserable, tangled bond between us. Yet hearing her so resolute, so distant, so completely certain she wanted no part of me anymore, it hollowed me out. She turned, and her eyes collided with mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her lips parted, maybe in surprise, maybe in anger. The lamplight from the lounge cast her in pale gold, her face flushed with the remnants of her talk with my mother. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat locked. She brushed past me without a word, her perfume, faint and achingly familiar, clinging to the air. My hand twitched as if to reach for her, but I kept it clenched at my side. I've let go. It was better this way. My mother exhaled softly, looking up at me from her perch. You heard her, didn't you? I turned my head just enough to acknowledge her. Her posture was stiff, eyes cautious. This is good, Kieran, she said gently. It means you two can coexist without tearing each other apart. That's good, for Daniel's sake, for yours. Good. My mother would think so. Like everyone else, she'd hated Sarah, been cold to her. She'd said she'd die before relinquishing the Luna title to her. Instead of answering, I just nodded. That seemed enough for her. She rose, smoothing down her blouse, and offered me a small, tight smile. It's the best outcome for everyone. Best for everyone except me, I thought bitterly, but didn't say it aloud. When she left, silence pressed in. The villa felt cavernous at night, the waves distant, the air thick with salt and heat. I walked back to my room, each step heavier than the last. I should have felt relieved, but all I could think of was how Sarah had looked when she said she was content, that flash of defiance in her eyes, that quiet certainty. And me? I felt anything but content. In my room, I poured myself a glass of scotch, but it tasted like acid. I sat at the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, staring at the dark ocean outside the window. For years, I'd told myself the right path was clear. Marry Celeste, the woman I'd chosen, the one who was beautiful, charming socially and politically aligned, the one who hadn't cost me my reputation, who hadn't been forced into my life by disaster and duty. Sarah was supposed to be the wrong choice. So why, after all this time, did being near her feel more right than anything else ever had? The memory of her unconscious on the beach earlier slammed into me. The panic, the sound of her cough when life returned to her, the way her wet shirt had clung to her body, reminding me of her softness, her warmth, everything I wasn't supposed to want. The way she'd pushed me away. I dragged a hand down my face, muttering a curse. I needed control. I needed order. Celeste. That was the answer. I had to remind myself what I was building toward. She was stability. She was the match that made sense. I picked up my phone before I could second-guess myself and found her name. It only rang once before she answered. Kieran? Her voice was breathless, excited. I was just thinking about you. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temple. How are you? Oh, you know me. I could hear the smile in her voice. I've been keeping busy. Pilates in the mornings, brunches with my friends, a little shopping. Yeah, my bank account knew all about her shopping spree. Did you know they've just released the most divine emerald collection at Cartier? It made me think of the ring I'll be wearing soon. She laughed, high and light. I swallowed hard. Celeste, and you? How's the island? I wish I were there. You must look so handsome against the ocean backdrop. Her tone softened, honey dripping over every word. I miss you. She always said the right things, always painted the picture we were supposed to fit into. A perfect pair, admired, envied, destined. But as she spoke, all I could see was Sarah kneeling on the sand, helping Daniel bury me, cheeks flushed, laughter bright and unrestrained. I miss you too, I forced out, though the words felt like gravel in my mouth. Celeste gasped softly, delighted. I can't wait until you're back. We'll plan the engagement announcement, the party, everything. It's going to be perfect. Perfect. The word lodged in my throat like a splinter. I made the right noises, agreed when she wanted me to, chuckled when she teased, but inside I felt the emptiness widening. When the call finally ended, she was glowing, dreaming aloud about our future. I was left staring at my reflection in the blackened window, like a glass of scotch untouched beside me. I'd done what I told myself I should. I'd reached for order, for the path I'd chosen, for the woman who represented everything safe, everything logical, and yet I'd never felt further from myself. Because the truth was, no matter how many times I told myself to do the right thing, my fucking heart wasn't listening. Kieran's puff. The sun hadn't fully cleared the horizon when I laced my running shoes. The air was still thick with the residue of night, the scent of salt water lingering over the island. Running had always been my method of processing thoughts, a rhythm to chase clarity, and clear my head before the chaos of the day demanded my attention. And gods knew I needed a clear head after the last couple of days. I slipped out of the villa quietly, careful not to disturb anyone still asleep. My mother would have left for her usual early walk, but I knew my father and Daniel would be asleep till the sun hung high in the sky. I envied them, wishing I could give myself to the oblivion of sleep. My thoughts, however, refused to rest. Sarah's words from last night echoed, repetitive and punishing. I've let go. She had moved on, yet the mere sound of her voice lingering in the hall felt like a tether around my chest. I exhaled sharply as I stepped out of the villa, the cool morning air filling my lungs. I pushed the memory away, focusing on the rhythm of my steps, the steady cadence of my heartbeat, the thrum of the earth beneath me. Half a mile in, I spotted her. Sarah, jogging along the crescent of beach that curved past the villa. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, sweat already glinting on her sun-kissed skin. Her stride was determined but cautious, eyes darting occasionally to the sand and surf. My heart skipped, a mix of delight and frustration surging through me. She'd plagued my mind so bad last night that I couldn't sleep, and now my attempt to clear my head had been interrupted by the very reason I needed my head cleared. A part of me, the sensible, logical part, told me to turn around, go back inside and avoid what would inevitably be another clash. But the reckless, brash part of me that had slowly and steadily been taking control wanted to stay. I wasn't stupid enough to approach her, but I told myself it was to keep her safe. After all, the last time she'd gone out to exercise in public, she'd gotten shot. Yes, I would just stay behind her, silent, unseen, making sure she was safe. I adjusted my pace, keeping a careful distance. She didn't seem to notice me, lost in her morning ritual, the sun illuminating the curve of her jaw, the soft set of her shoulders, and the way her breath caught in the rhythm of her legs. My lungs burned as I forced myself to slow. I wasn't used to the leisurely pace, and I could feel Ashar chafe, wanting to run fast and hard. But I liked this. If I let myself get a little more delusional, I could pretend Sarah and I were running side by side, enjoying watching the sun rise, basking in the sereneness punctuated by the whisper of waves and the distant cry of seagulls. And then it happened. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and before I could process what it was, before I could reach Sarah, the snake struck. It was fast. A streak of venomous bronze coiling up from the grass edging the beach. Its fangs sank into her ankle before she realized what was happening. Her sharp, startled cry sliced through the morning and straight through me. My feet hammered against the sand, adrenaline igniting every fiber of my body. "Sarah!" I shouted, sprinting the final few meters. She tried to jerk her leg away, panic and fear flashing across her features. I reached her just in time, my hands clasping around her arm, steadying her. The snake recoiled at the sudden intrusion, giving me just enough time to act. My instincts took over. Years of training, of controlling instinctual alpha responses collided with pure, raw urgency. I grabbed the snake and, with a vicious jerk of my wrist, flung it to the side. It smashed against a rock with a sickening squelch, fluid smearing as it slid to the ground, unmoving. My attention immediately diverted to Sarah as her knees buckled and she slid to the ground. Still bracing my arms around her, I pulled her to me, reaching for her injured leg. "Ow!" she groaned, her face scrunched up in pain. "Fuck!" I swore as my gaze dropped to the 2 small sharp puncture marks glistened against her skin, surrounded by a faint halo of redness. Tiny droplets of blood clung to the edges, almost imperceptible, but the swelling had begun already, a subtle bulge that spoke of venom spreading. "Kay Kieran," she stammered, voice trembling. I gritted my teeth, fighting the surge of fear that clawed through me. "It's okay, Sarah. I've got you." Her leg shook under my hand as I bent closer. I could see the faint purpling of the skin where the venom was beginning its insidious crawl, a silent warning of what would happen if I didn't act immediately. My heart thudded in my chest, my body violently reacting to her vulnerability, to the thought of her in danger. I knew what kind of snake that was, knew that the venom would paralyze her within minutes if left untreated. Without hesitation, I pressed my lips to the bite, sucking carefully, tasting the metallic tang of blood and the sharp sting of venom. Sarah's gasp of shock, the tremor in her body, none of it registered beyond the singular focus of saving her. Even as I worked, I couldn't stop the thoughts racing through me. How fragile she seemed in this moment. How much she relied on me even though I knew she hated that she did. How I'd never let anything ever hurt her again. "Don't move," I muttered between breaths. "Just a little more." Her hand gripped my shoulder, claws of fear digging into my skin, but she didn't resist. I felt her pulse under my lips, fluttering wildly with panic and adrenaline. My own body trembled with effort, but I refused to let go until I knew the venom was completely out of her system. Finally, I pulled back and spat one last time into the sand before wiping my mouth on the back of my hand. Sarah's eyes were wide and unsteady, but alive. "Come on," I said, my voice low and steady. "We're getting you to the clinic." She stumbled slightly, leaning against me as I scooped her up, carrying her the short distance to the small island clinic a few minutes away from the villa. Daniel was still asleep, the villa unaware of the morning chaos, and that was as it should be. This moment, as terrifying and overwhelming as it was between Sarah and me. We said nothing as I carried her. My arms tightened every time she shivered, and her head was resting against my chest, so I knew she could feel my thundering heartbeat. The clinic was cool, sterile, and glaringly bright, a sharp contrast to the sun-washed vibrance of the beach. I set her gently on the examination table, fingers lingering at her wrist, checking pulse, temperature, and reflexes even as the doctor approached. Only 2 staff worked at the clinic, Dr. Lynch and a nurse who was nowhere in sight. I studied Sarah closely as the doctor gently examined the bite. Her shoulders were tense, jaw tight. There was a faint sheen of sweat clinging to the nape of her neck, even though her skin had cooled since the adrenaline spike. Each detail anchored me in the present, tethered me to a responsibility I had never felt before, but now accepted wholeheartedly, to keep Sarah safe, no matter the cost. When he was finished with his examination, Dr. Lynch stepped back, his brows furrowed. "She's fine." He turned to me. "What first aid did you apply, Alpha?" I sucked the venom out. My voice sounded rough, tight. "Ah," he nodded, smiling in approval. "Quick thinking, Alpha." He turned his smile to Sarah. "You'll be fine. The venom is out, and you're in no danger. You'll be sore, and your ankle will be tender for a while, but other than that, you're all good. I'll just give you some ointment for the swelling, some medication in case of infection, and bandage you up." Sarah's shoulders slumped. "Thank you," she exhaled. Dr. Lynch shook his head. "I didn't do the hard part." Sarah's gaze flickered to me briefly. "Now," Dr. Lynch continued, pulling out a clipboard, "I just have a couple of questions about your diet and routine. When was your last meal? Any unusual foods? Supplements? What's your exercise regimen like?" She usually eats fruit, yogurt, or oats for breakfast, though she doesn't eat this early, so I doubt she's had anything today. She drinks water, fresh juice, or coffee. Not a huge fan of snacking. As for exercise, she does rigorous cardio, strength training, and resistance work. She takes folic acid supplements, but no new medications, at least nothing that would interfere with her system. I kept my gaze firmly on the doctor, but I didn't miss the way Sarah's wide eyes darted to me, a shadow of shock on her face. Frankly, I was shocked too. I didn't realize I had paid so much attention to her until now. "Ah," the doctor said, jotting notes. "She's well cared for. I can see why she handled the shock better than most. Most mates, even without the saliva, would barely manage this calmly." I stiffened at the same time. Sarah's breath stuttered. Excuse me?" Dr. Lynch shrugged. "I'm just saying that Alpha Kieran clearly cares deeply for you, Luna." "I'm not his Luna," Sarah sputtered. "We're not mates." The doctor raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "Interesting. Even after drawing the venom out, you should still have been affected. Typically, only mates' saliva can heal injuries in this manner." I frowned as he continued. "But you're Alpha," he shrugged. "Powerful enough that it may just be a coincidence." I nodded, neck stiff, trying to ignore the sharp stabbing pain in my chest that emanated from the fervent way she denied any connection with me. I've let go. I watched as Dr. Lynch applied ointment to her injury and bandaged it up. "Rest," the doctor advised when he was done. "Stay off that ankle for at least 24 hours. Simple diet, hydrate well, and avoid stress." I nodded, guiding Sarah out of the clinic. The morning sun was now high enough to burn through the lingering haze, warm on my shoulders. She stumbled slightly on the sand and I reached out, steadying her without a word. Surprisingly, she leaned in without resistance, letting me half carry her, keeping the weight off her injured leg. "Thank you," she murmured, her first words to me since I sucked the venom out. Her gaze met mine, still a little shaken and full of something I couldn't name. Gratitude? Relief? A fraction of trust? She exhaled. "Yesterday, too, at the beach. Thank you. You always seem to be saving me." "You don't need to thank me," I said, voice low, grip firm on her waist and arm. "I'd do it again. Anytime." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she didn't say anything else. We walked back to the villa slowly. Every step was measured, careful. The sound of the waves reminded me of yesterday, of the chaos that had nearly consumed her. And yet now she was alive, steady in my arms, and for once, I allowed myself a moment to simply be present without desire, without resentment. But beneath the quiet, the ache persisted. I couldn't ignore how close I had been to losing her, again. I couldn't ignore the pull, the surge of protectiveness that flared at every step. The villa came into view, the familiar whitewashed walls bathed in gold. I set her down gently at the threshold, my fingers brushing her arm, a silent reminder. I was here. Always. Serafina's povie. The villa felt unusually bright when we returned, the sunlight spilling over the floors like molten gold. I barely had time to process the warmth before Daniel's sharp voice cut through the silence. "Mom." His tiny feet thundered down the hall, and he skidded to a halt in front of me, humming with excitement. He was still in his pajamas, his hair adorably sleep-rumpled. But his bright smile dimmed as he took me in, and then his brows furrowed as his gaze dipped. "What happened? Are you hurt?" I glanced down at my neatly bandaged ankle and felt a pang of embarrassment. I'd been here less than 2 days and had almost drowned and gotten bitten. How was I supposed to keep my son safe if I couldn't stay out of danger? "It's nothing, hon. Just a tiny scrape," I said lightly, though the lingering sting from the snake bite throbbed faintly beneath the bandage. Daniel's dark eyes narrowed in suspicion. My son's instincts were sharp, even at 9 years old. He darted a glance toward Kieran, whose presence by the doorway was protective, yet somehow predatory, almost like he was watching out for any more snakes lurking around the villa. "She's fine, champ," Kieran chimed in. "Your mom just needs a little rest and to stay off her feet." "I can help you, Mom," Daniel insisted, stepping closer. Before I could respond, Kieran moved. He was faster than I expected, and in one fluid motion he had scooped me into his arms, cradling me as though I weighed nothing. My protests automatically arose. "Kieran, I don't need," I started, but the words faltered under the dizziness of being lifted off my feet. The villa seemed to blur around me, the walls, the furniture, even Daniel's wide-eyed look, all fading into the background as Kieran's overwhelming presence took central stage. "I can go by myself." My words fumbled out. It was one thing to lean on him when we were alone, but something about having an audience, even if it was Daniel, actually, especially if it was Daniel, brought a flush creeping up my neck. "Mom," Daniel said, "you always took care of me and Dad and everybody. Let someone else take care of you for a change." His voice was solemn, and I found that there was no way I could argue with his logic. I glanced at Kieran's strong arms around me, at the precise way he held me, so I wouldn't jar my ankle, and the flush spread to my cheeks. I hated how helpless I felt, but there was no way I could refuse in front of Daniel. "All right," I muttered, voice tight with embarrassment, and let Kieran carry me up the villa's steps. The weightlessness of being in his arms was both comforting and infuriating at once. Once inside the bedroom, he gently lowered me onto the bed. His hands lingered at my sides as if checking to ensure I wasn't injured further. I squirmed slightly. "Kieran, I can sit up? Really, I don't need all this fuss," I said, trying to assert independence. He ignored my words. Instead, he adjusted the pillows behind me, smoothing them down until my back was supported perfectly. His hands brushed mine as he tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, the touch light but electric. I felt heat prick my neck. "You're overdoing it," I muttered. "I'm not," he said quietly, voice low, almost unreadable. "I'm making sure you're okay." I tried to focus on something else, anything else, but my eyes kept catching his. The intensity there made my chest tighten. He didn't stop there. Within minutes, he had prepared a tray with fresh juice, cut fruit, and a small bowl of oats with honey. I thought back to how he'd so easily prattled off my routine and diet to the doctor as if, "I'm just saying that Alpha Kira clearly cares deeply for you, Luna." I shoved the memory to the back of my mind, along with the warmth it elicited. Kieran knowing what I ate and how I lived was disturbing, not sweet. Definitely not sweet. "How did you know all that stuff you told the doctor?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral as he set the tray on the side table. His lips quirked slightly. "You're a creature of habit," he replied smoothly, settling onto the edge of the bed without touching me, yet somehow occupying the space in a way that made the air between us taut. "Right." I reached for a glass of water from the side table, and he moved at the same time, so our fingers brushed. I jerked my hand back almost immediately, but the fleeting contact made a shiver run through me, one I tried hard to ignore. Clearing his throat, Kieran handed me the glass of water, and I took it, careful not to let our fingers touch again. Daniel perched on the edge of the bed beside me, eyes wide with admiration. "Wow, Mom, Dad's taking care of you so well," he said, voice tinged with awe. I swallowed, torn between the absurdity of the situation and the undeniable warmth creeping into my chest. I could feel Kieran's gaze on me, vigilant and unyielding. "I don't need to be babied," I muttered. "I'm not babying you. I'm keeping you alive," he said simply, like it was the most logical thing in the world. I exhaled sharply. The way he said it, the way he looked at me, so grounded, so absolute, made my chest burn. "Kieran?" He didn't respond immediately. He simply arranged the blanket over my legs, straightening it with precise movements. Then he turned to Daniel, who had been watching with wide-eyed wonder. "You need to give your mom space. Let her rest," Kieran instructed, his tone firm but not harsh. Daniel frowned slightly, but then nodded, though not without casting a lingering glance at Kieran. "Okay, but can I help with breakfast?" he asked cautiously. Kieran's lips curved faintly. "Sure, bud, I'm sure the chef won't mind. I'll stay here and keep your mom company." I wanted to protest, but the look in Kieran's eyes, the one that said he would brook no argument, made me bite back the words. Throughout the morning, he attended to every little thing with a meticulousness that left me simultaneously grateful and flustered. It was even worse, or better, than when I was seasick on the ship. He refilled my water glass before I could ask. He adjusted the pillows, checked the blanket, and even ensured the tray of food stayed within reach. Every movement was precise, careful, protective. At one point, I caught him watching me while I sipped my juice, his gaze lingering on the curve of my neck, the tilt of my shoulder. Heat rose to my ears, and I set the glass down quickly, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. "Are you feeling well enough to eat?" he asked quietly. His voice was close, but not overbearing, yet the weight of his attention made my stomach clench. Yes, I said softly, trying to appear composed. He nodded once, satisfied, and returned to arranging the fruit and oats on the tray. His movements seemed so natural, almost intimate in the way he cared for me, and for all my protests, part of me still liked the way he fussed over me. But the other part of me couldn't help remembering the past chaos of our relationship. When Daniel went to play on his PlayStation, I tried to catch my breath, hoping for a moment of privacy. But Kieran didn't leave. Instead, he hovered near the bed, waiting silently like a butler on standby, ready to respond to any need, ease any discomfort. As the day wore on, he moved with a calm precision, helping me adjust my ankle position, preparing meals, and even sitting near me while I rested, reading quietly without speaking. And each time our hands brushed, each time our eyes met, it sent a jolt of awareness through me. I hated the way my body responded to him, how my pulse raced when he knelt beside me to adjust the bandage, or how my chest tightened when he carried the tray. I hated that, even when I was angry or flustered, I wanted to feel his presence. But the tension built quietly until it became unbearable. And when he offered to help me with something as basic and invasive as getting to the bathroom, I finally snapped. "Kieran," my voice was sharp, startling even myself. "This is going too far." Kieran froze, expression unreadable for a moment. "I'm just trying to—" "I know," I said. "I know, and I'm grateful, but—" I exhaled, shaking my head. "I've gotten hurt worse than this, and I'm not even that hurt right now. And you're—" I swallowed hard, struggling for the right words. "We can't keep doing this in front of Daniel. You're giving him the wrong idea. He'll only be more disappointed when reality returns. Kieran's throat worked, and I thought he was going to argue further, but then he slowly nodded. "You're right," he said quietly, tone soft but resolute. "I'll get someone else to take care of you." I blinked at him, astonished at the sudden acquiescence. You agree?" "I agree," he said simply. "I'll arrange for one of the Omegas to assist you. You won't have to rely on me for anything." I exhaled, relief and frustration mingling in equal parts. The thought of not having Kieran hovering so closely was comforting. Yet the absence of his protective presence left a sudden void I couldn't ignore.